guys ready? Ready? All right. We'll call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the February 1st, 2024 meeting of the Minnetonka Planning Commission. The Commission generally meets on the first and third Thursdays of the month. The schedule and tentative agendas can be obtained by calling the Planning Department or by checking the city website at minnetonkamn.gov. The Commission holds public hearings on land use applications. From a specific process standpoint, that means we make recommendations to the City Council on rezonings, subdivisions, conditional use permits, and amendments to the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision regulations. We also make final decisions on site plans, signs requests, and variance requests, and expansion permits, unless these requests are part of an application that must be heard by the City Council. In that case, the Commission makes a recommendation and the Council makes the final decision. The City notifies property owners within at least 400 feet of the sites, posts signs on the properties, and places notices in the Lakeshore Weekly News and the Minnetonka Memo. Any aggrieved party may appeal a final Planning Commission decision to the City Council. If you wish to appeal, you must submit a written request to the City within 10 days of this meeting. From a broader standpoint, the City's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision regulations are the City's best efforts to codify a balance between individual rights and community responsibilities. Individual rights are easy to understand. Community responsibilities are more subtle, but the idea is that we, as members of the community, agree to limit our individual rights for the common good of the group. The Planning Department, the Planning Commission, and the City Council are charged with managing this sometimes difficult balancing act. We ask you to keep this broader perspective in mind as we review tonight's applications. Again, welcome. Staff, please call roll.
Hanson.
Here.
Henry.
Here.
Maxwell. Here. Minion.
Here.
Waterman.
Here.
Banks.
Here.
Chairstool.
Here. There are all 7 of us here tonight. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and I believe there is a change memo.
Yes, Chair, Commissioners, we do have a change memo this evening for item 8B, the Minnetonka Flats item. We received a number of comments that came in after the packet was distributed last week. So, excuse me, those are included in the change memo for tonight's meeting. That is all.
Great, thank you. And we have all read the change memo, so we have all those comments. Thank you. Recognizing the change memo, would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
I'll make that motion.
Motion Henry.
A second.
Second Banks. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next is approval of minutes from the January 18th, 2024 meeting. Commissioners, any changes to those minutes? It's a pretty brief meeting, it was. Yes, thank you. I believe that was in the minutes. Thank you. All right. Sounds like there are no changes to the minutes, so I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from January 18th.
I will make that motion.
Motion Hanson.
I'll second.
Second Maxwell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next is item 5, report from staff.
Chair, Commissioners, thank you. Just a few things from Monday night's council meeting. We had items that came from the Planning Commission, including a subdivision, the Oberg Estates project that's on 2-lot subdivision on Oakland Road that was approved by the council on the consent agenda. Also on the consent agenda was the conditional use permit for the educational facility on, what's the name of the church? I'm forgetting. The church on Excelsior Boulevard. It's Faith. It is Faith. Thank you, Julie. Faith Church on Excelsior Boulevard. We introduced also an ordinance amending the sign regulations, and you'll see that here at your next meeting, where we're changing the non-commercial signage allowed on residential property. The council looked at 2 options, and this is really a response to what's happened with the elections and ranked choice voting for candidates, in that you can have many candidates available to support in a ranked choice voting system, and the council was supportive of basically allowing more signage for non-commercial signs on residential property in that vein. So there'll be an ordinance you'll be looking at in a couple of weeks on that, and then I'll then go back to the council if you with your recommendation. So that was introduced. And then we had two other discussion items. One I had mentioned previously, the Walser Kia project that was not approved by the council in December, just with the number of votes. Walser asked the council if they would reconsider an application. They accepted that. So we had a resubmittal of new plans for the Walser project. And essentially it's the same project, except the parking ramp is 3 levels instead of 4. That's the material change to the project. So the council considered that on Monday night, and they unanimously approved that plan with the three levels of ramps there. And then the last item was the English Rose concept. That was the down the street here. The dementia village is what the applicant Joshua Wirt had termed that. Council gave feedback on that concept. Kind of similar comments to the planning commissions with, we'd like it to be a park, but if it's not a park, this might be okay. Do you think you can do everything on here you'd like? You know, kind of those types of comments. So we'll see where that ends up going if they do bring that back in some fashion in the future. So those are all of the items from the Planning Commission. A couple of things just to pay attention to. The draft of the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan was posted on the website last week. It's out on Minnetonka Matters, and that's available for public comment through about the 3rd week in February. So there's a few weeks to comment on that. Then that'll go through a review process with the Sustainability Commission and City Council. Actually, and City Council is actually even going to talk about it on Monday night during their study session. So that's out there for your consumption and knowledge. Lastly, as staff, I'd welcome Dana Minion, our new planning commissioner. He's starting his first meeting tonight, and that's after being appointed on Monday. We gave him the option to sit out or sit in, and he said, "I'm going to be here." So we'll get Dana up the curve on all of our planning commission happenings and knowledge about technology and training and all that. So we welcome him aboard for his first term here. So
thank you for the welcome, and thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to serving with you and serving our community.
Very good. That's all I've got, Chair. Our next meeting is on the 22nd.
Oh, 3 weeks. Okay.
Yeah, 3 weeks.
Great. Thank you. Commissioners, anything to report? Moving on to item 6. Yes, Commissioner Henry.
Thanks, Chair. Nothing to report, but just a question for Lauren, too. About that Walser Kia proposal, what's the criteria for if an applicant resubmits something materially to go right to the City Council versus come back to the Planning Commission? I know it's not that common, but is there any thing written down, or is it just an ad hoc basis?
That there's certainly discretion that the city has, and if we would want Planning Commission to have some more review of it, if we had a more substantial change, then I think we would want to take that through the process for your input and a recommendation to the council. But immaterial in the scope of the project in terms of the impacts that would have on other systems with infrastructure and stuff like that. So
Thanks.
All right. Doesn't look like much. I just want to say congrats to the rest of the Planning Commission for being appointed to another term. I don't know if everybody knows that, but you were appointed. Also, I believe Commissioner Henry is on the Sustainability Commission, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right. Congrats on that. And also a special call out to Commissioner Banks for serving on the DEI Commission. The first time that commission is being formed, so I can't think of a better person to represent the city on that. So thank you for doing that.
yeah, thank you.
All right. Next is moving on is to item 7, consent agenda. And we have no items on that. So moving on to item 8, which is the non-consent agenda items. Before we begin consideration of non-consent agenda items, I'd like to review the steps in the process and the public hearing procedure that will be followed for each proposal. First, the item will be announced and the staff will report on the subject. The commission will then ask questions. Next, the applicant will be invited to make a presentation or offer comments. Commissioners may ask additional questions at this time. After the applicant is finished, the public hearing will be open to give anyone present the opportunity to comment on the proposal. If you wish to speak, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. We ask you keep your comments brief and try not to repeat points already made. Once everyone has spoken, we may allow speakers to return for additional comments at larger meetings. Neighborhood spokespeople are encouraged and will be given up to 15 minutes to present. The public hearing will then be closed and no further comments will be allowed. The commission will discuss the proposal and make a decision. The first item on tonight's agenda is item 8A, a preliminary plat of Emerald Estates with floodplain alteration permit and tree removal variance at 2503, 2505, 2511, and 2615 Plymouth Road. And just before we go into this item, I just want to let people in the audience who are here for the second item, the items concerning Minnetonka Flats, this first item will probably take at least an hour, maybe 90 minutes, depending on how things go. So I just want you to plan and pace yourself and bathroom breaks accordingly. So just so you know, I want to give you some idea of how long this is probably going to take. So just giving the caveat now so you can plan accordingly. So, all right, item 8A, I believe, Ms. Thomas, this is your item.
Thank you, Chair Sewell and Commissioners. Most of you will recall that this body considered a proposal for this site back in December. But for those of you that were not with us, and for those of you that may be a little bit fuzzy on the details, I'll go into a bit of background. So this site is located on the east side of Plymouth Road. It's comprised of 4 individual lots comprising about 11 acres in size. There's several existing buildings on the property, 3 homes and a series of accessory buildings. Beyond those constructed elements, there's a large floodplain area, kind of a low area that holds water on the north side of the site, and then a woodland preservation area that's considered a wood oak brushland. Let me make sure I said that right. An oak woodland brushland preservation area on the west central area of the site. Outside of that WPA, there are 485 trees that are protected under the city's tree protection ordinance. In December of last year, this body reviewed a proposal for a 13-lot subdivision. The access for that subdivision was off of Plymouth Road. The subdivision did include a floodplain alteration permit and variances to right-of-way width, some lot width variances, some lot depth variances, and then front yard setback variances. At that time, we didn't have real complete tree data, so we weren't sure whether the proposal would meet the city's tree protection ordinance. So staff did recommend denial of this project for a variety of reasons that were outlined in your written staff report. The applicant at that time chose to extend the decision deadline that's outlined in state statute, allowing the commission to table the item and allowing the applicant time to work on changes to the proposal. And so then that brings us to what we have before you tonight. So this revised proposal is for a 14-lot subdivision. Access to 12 of the 14 lots would be via an extension of the Emerald Trail existing right-of-way, which is immediately north of the site. The 2 other lots, which are on the west side of the site, kind of that northwest corner, would be accessed directly off of Plymouth Road. So to accommodate the installation of public infrastructure, so that would be the road, city sewer and water, stormwater management facilities that are required, as well as grading for the home sites. Certainly there would be earthwork that would be necessary. Earthwork would be from minimal on some areas of the site to up to 9 feet of either fill or excavation. Roughly 8,600 square feet of floodplain storage area would be filled That area would be recreated and then some in what I've called kind of a dual purpose stormwater management floodplain storage area on the northerly portion of the site. The primary differences between the 2023 proposal and the 2024 proposal then are a one-lot increase in the number of lots on the site, a significant reduction in the floodplain alteration that's proposed. This new proposal eliminates the roadway and all of the lot and setback variances. But now, with having all of the tree information, staff has determined that the proposal does require variances to each of the levels of protection that our ordinance calls out. So to the woodland protection area, the high priority tree removal threshold, and the significant tree removal threshold. We are calling out just one tree removal variance, though the threshold is exceeded in each of these. As I outlined in the written staff report, staff focused on two primary questions when we were reviewing this proposal. And the first was whether or not subdivision of the site is generally reasonable. And as we said in December, we say again here that we continue to believe that subdivision of this property in some form is reasonable. In particular, the two lots that form the larger portion of the site are significantly large compared to other properties in the area. Subdivision of some kind is reasonable. It's been anticipated that subdivision would occur. The second question then is whether this specific subdivision is reasonable, and we find that it's not, specifically due to that tree removal variance. We're looking at a variance from 35% allowable high priority tree removal to 50%, and from 50% allowable significant tree removal to 71%. As the commission is aware, whether we're talking about a variance for a garage addition or a tree removal variance, the city may grant a variance when it can make certain findings, and those findings are outlined in state statute, and that statute is reflected in city code. And one of those findings is that there needs to be a practical difficulty that prevents the applicant from meeting the ordinance standard. And practical difficulty is defined, again, in state statute and city ordinance. And it means that the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, that the plight of the owner or the applicant is due to a circumstance unique to the property, not created by the landowner or the applicant, and that the variance, if granted, would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Now, the applicant suggests in their narrative that the lack of a preferred access point, the significant floodplain on the area, the classification and the number of trees, that these present a practical difficulty in complying with the tree protection ordinance. And staff, we simply disagree. We would suggest that those are site features and that they're not unique site features in Minnetonka. We would further suggest that these site features don't prevent the tree ordinance from being met. They don't require that trees be removed in excess of the ordinance standard. Rather, it's likely the number of lots that are being proposed that prevent the tree ordinance from being met. So essentially, staff would argue that the primary purpose of this ordinance is to maximize the number of lots that can be developed. So to conclude then, staff absolutely does believe that these properties, there is some reasonable development that can happen on these sites. We simply don't believe that this specific development is reasonable. And so we do recommend denial with those findings that have been outlined in your resolution. And so I would turn it back to the chair for questions and comments.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, I'm sure we have some questions. Commissioner Hanson, I think You're ready to go.
Yeah, I have two quick questions. Thanks, Ms. Thomas. Thanks, Chair. Ms. Thomas, just to make sure technically I'm understanding you, there's kind of three stratifications of priorities of trees. So what you're saying tonight is one variance can take care of all three. You don't need three variances for each of the three tiers.
Chair, we are calling out just one variance to tree removal here. The applicant and city staff did meet this morning to have a conversation about the woodland preservation area. There's some disagreement about how we're calculating that removal component, and I'm sure that our engineers and natural resources people can continue to have that discussion before going on to the council. We can continue to do that. Regardless, the high priority tree number and the significant number kind of are what they are. So that's why we're just calling out the one variance.
No, I just want to make sure I interpreted that. If I can ask a follow-up, just for transparency's sake, I think the city would say, hey, if there's one or two or however many fewer lots, then there's not as much of a problem. If I were to look at the site proposal, does the city have an opinion on which one of those lots would go away, or does that turn to the applicant? Because you have kind of guided to that answer so far.
Yeah, Chair Sewell and Commissioner, or Chair Sewell and Commissioner Hanson. Yeah, I got that right. No, the city doesn't have a preference. Our preference is that the tree ordinance be met. So whatever that design is that meets that component.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Commissioner Banks, you have a question.
Thanks, Chair. Just two quick questions. Do we know what percentage of the, with this new plan, this new proposal, what percentage of the floodplain was reduced? Or how much was it reduced by?
Chair and Commissioner Banks, it was reduced significantly. The previous proposal, the entirety of the floodplain was filled to accommodate the roadway and then to accommodate these two new buildable lots. The city actually, in our recommendation, recommended denial of the floodplain alteration permit also as part of that. This particular proposal fills just a sliver of the northeast side of the existing floodplain. Our engineering staff didn't even comment on the floodplain alteration as part of this project because it is a significant reduction in floodplain alteration.
And just to follow up, so Emerald Trail will have to be extended through with this new plan, assuming we don't need a variance for that. I don't see it listed. Correct? Is that
Correct.
Okay. How wide is Emerald Trail? How wide is that road?
Chair and Commissioner Banks, I don't know off the top of my head. My assumption is that it's the same width as a standard city roadway, which would be a 50-foot wide right-of-way and a 26 wide pavement, which is standard in our community.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Henry.
Thanks, Chair. Just one question about the floodplain alteration. You mentioned that the alteration was significantly reduced. Some of the comments we got from the neighbors were expressing concern about more runoff with this than what there is existing too. It sounds like from your response, your answer to Commissioner Banks, that city engineers don't have any concerns about increased runoff with this new proposal. Is that correct?
Chair Sewell and Commissioner Henry, that is correct.
Thanks.
Other questions? Commissioner Waterman.
Thanks, Chair. I just have a few here. Regarding steep slopes, I was a little surprised that there isn't the need for a steep slope variance.
Chair Sewell and Commissioner Waterman, there is steep slope on this property, and the steep slope, I apologize, we don't have it called out here. It's generally in this area. If you can see my very small cursor. There are no 30% slopes on the site. There are 20+% slopes. The code doesn't say that 20% slopes can't be built on. The code does say that we have to make certain findings, that you're trying to avoid those 20% slopes, trying to not grade out. From staff's perspective, this project does a fairly good job of avoiding those 20% slopes. Certainly, were this project approved, we would want to look at specific grading plans for each home site to ensure that those specific plans for those specific home designs stayed out of that 20% area.
Great, thanks. And then my second question just has to do with one of the comments in the change memo packet, actually from the county, where, I mean, they really said pretty clearly they're not supportive of the two lots having separate direct access, and then they also had some other concerns. Does this, in that this is kind of like a late addition, would that, I guess what's my question here? Like, barring the issues with the tree ordinance in here, would this kind of also further cause the city to recommend denial?
Chair Sewell and Commissioner Waterman, I'll start, and my colleagues may jump in. I think that the county obviously has jurisdiction over access to their county right-of-way. I think that this property does have direct access to the existing right-of-way that's non-developed to the north, so there may be some opportunities for those lots to gain access in another location. My colleagues are nodding, so I think they agree.
Good, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Yeah, Commissioner Henry.
Thanks, Chair. One more follow-up too. With the relative to the steep slopes, you mentioned that there could be up to plus or minus 9 feet of fill in this area. I know we breached the subject before in previous proposals, but can you confirm that the city doesn't have a hard limit to say that the maximum amount of feet of fill has to be this certain amount, that it's all just based on the finished product and what the slopes would be like afterwards? It's taken more holistically?
Chair Sewell and Commissioner Henry, that is correct. I'd also point out that as we reviewed this project in December of last year, one of staff's primary concerns was the retaining walls and the heights of retaining walls and the fill associated with those retaining walls, or the excavation immediately adjacent to the roadways, and we were concerned about longevity and future maintenance and repair associated with those retaining walls and the roadways and the utilities beneath those. This proposal has removed, there are some retaining walls still adjacent to the roadways, but they're significantly shorter, and so this project does improve upon that concern.
So the question wouldn't be if the amount of fill that they have to put in or take away would be greater or less. It's just the more appropriate would be the end product. Is it going to have higher walls or lower than the previous one?
Agreed.
Thanks.
Commissioner Hanson, you have another question?
Yeah, sorry for butting in. I'm just going to ask the staff. Going back to the trees, Ms. Thomas, my apologies. If I get oriented to the site, I'm kind of going back to my original question on which lot. Is there a section of the map in which trees could go, or a lot could go, that alleviates the tree the tree ordinance the most? Like if I said the northeast quadrant, is that where the largest issue occurs?
I think Chair Sewell and Commissioner Hanson, without designing for the applicant, I think, and maybe not zooming in, but I think you can kind of look at where are the lots where you see all of these little gray dots and you see a house superimposed on those little gray dots. So we see, and we're talking about trees outside of the woodland preservation area. So there's a lot of trees in this area. there's some trees maybe associated with the cul-de-sac in this area. So whether it's shortening the cul-de-sac, eliminating lots, a combination of those things.
Okay, that's helpful. I feel like if you're not a regular attendee of city planning commission meetings, you might not have dug into the packet. So I'm just trying to kind of help ground people at where to from a map standpoint are we honing in on a tree variance. So thank you.
Other questions for city staff? I just have a question. I'm sure there's going to be lots of discussion around access to this site. The county makes it challenging when they're not supportive of opening up any curb along along county roads. But essentially, current conditions, there is a drive aisle that already, essentially a curb cut that's already there. Is there any reason the access couldn't come from there? Even this is something we'd have to talk obviously with the applicant about, but if they were to lose that northwestmost lot, is that something that could be achieved? Because I'm thinking, how do we kind of decrease the tree loss but change the access? Because I have a feeling that's what most of the public comments are going to be about. So to kind of talk me through that, I'm curious. Maybe it's a question more for Hennepin County, but how can they not allow access, especially if it's already there? I don't understand that.
In conversation with the county chair, Sewell, the county has made it very clear to me that they will allow one access point to this site. That access point obviously has to meet their minimum design standards, and it has to be a safe access point. That's as far as they'll kind of go with me at this point. But yes, you're right, there has to be, the county has to allow some type of access point to the property. But that's where we stand now. I would point out that this was something that was presented to the county that the county suggested they would allow. Now this had a lot of internal issues from the city's perspective when it came to trees and lot.
Set those aside.
Correct. So from an
Access-wise.
access perspective, this was something that the county indicated that they had supported it at that point. So
Okay. So yeah, I know there's a few different challenges, and I know that's not, the recommendation is not based on this access issue, but I'm just maybe jumping ahead to solutioning. But,
certainly.
okay, all right, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions for staff? Now's a good chance. We'll have others though. Okay. All right, we will move along then. I think we're probably ready to hear from the applicant. If you'd like to come forward. Welcome to Lake West Night here at the City of Minnetonka. You're going to be up here a while, so pace yourself. If you can give us your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Thank you. Kelsey Thompson, the Development Director at Lake West Development, 14525 Highway 7 here in Minnetonka. All right, good evening. Thanks for having us back here tonight. And a big thanks to staff for working with us on this project. Since we were here last, we met with staff in person and have had multiple conversations by conference call, and appreciate their suggestions and guidance in coming up with the plan that you're reviewing tonight. Also, a big thanks to our development team. They're sitting in the audience tonight. With me is Luke Halstead and Mike St. Martin from Laux, which is our engineering firm, and Kurt Fretham at Lake West. And also thank you to the Planning Commission for reviewing our application this evening, and to all the neighbors who are here tonight, if there's anyone in the audience for this project. So on the screen, I've highlighted the subject properties. The two parcels there on the south, we typically refer to them as the Dudica properties, and the two northern parcels we refer to as the Irving properties, for a total of just under 11.5 acres. I did include on the site, or on this slide, our plan that you might be familiar with if you were here at the Planning Commission when we had our concept review, just to jog your memory. To kind of answer your question, Chair Saul, is we did have a proposal or a plan, a concept that used that southern access point, if you see on the right-hand side, when we had our concept review, that uses that existing access. The county, like Susan had mentioned, wasn't in support of that because of their site distance review. The county was pretty adamant about placing the access right in the middle of the two parcels for the best site review. And that happens to be, as Susan mentioned, in the middle of the WPA area, which wouldn't meet the tree threshold. I don't have the plan on the page, but the one that we most recently had submitted with staff that we didn't get to go over the last time we were here, using the Woodbridge access, the county was okay with that, but they did require a 300-foot long turn lane with that access point, taking out quite a few more trees and retaining walls along the road. So that really wasn't favorable, as well as some other issues of it going through the floodplain. And I wasn't planning to go into that detail tonight, but just thought I'd answer that for the point of your question. So the reason I wanted to show this is because you're probably wondering why we're including the two northern properties now, and in our concept review we were just, coming forth with the two Dutica properties. And do I have control of this, or I do? Okay. And so on this screen you can kind of see that there's a vacation of an access. Maybe they have it on a screen somewhere right here. So this Burlwood Road access, this was a planned access that the city eliminated back in like 1995 and gave away this property to the two landowners there off Crescent Ridge. So with that taking of this access, we were really limited to where to put the access. Obviously, with the county also restricting access off the county road, we then felt forced to buy the northern properties to really provide access, reasonable access to this site. So that granted us access to, using either the Woodbridge Trail, which we tried this last go around, and now coming in off that Emerald Trail extension that staff has helped guide us to use. I'm going to go back a slide here to our actual plan that we're proposing tonight and that you will be deliberating on. So this is the 14-lot plan. It extends the cul-de-sac from Emerald Trail, bypassing that floodplain and serving 12 lots. The 2 lots on the northwest there will use the existing access with a shared driveway. And as I mentioned before, following staff's suggestion of using the Emerald Trail access, this plan is in conformance with the code on all requirements except for would require a tree removal variance, as mentioned. Again, to reiterate, the tree removal variance is a result of the past planning when the city decided to remove or eliminate this access and giving it to those two homeowners. If we did have this access today, we likely would not be needing to buy the northern properties for access to this site. On the next slide, I just have some documentation. So this is the plat from Bent Tree with that planned right-of-way easement for the Burlwood Road access point that's now, no longer in use. And just the document that shows, the petition that was signed and when this was vacated. Here in the section of ordinance under tree protection, we understand the importance of meeting the tree thresholds. This plan exceeds those tree thresholds due to this practical difficulty that I just explained. The exception here to the rule is the city council may allow removal of protected trees over the percentages listed, which Susan went over earlier of the 35%, 25%, and 50%. In the case that the removal would promote greater public good, such as providing reasonable use or access to the property. This 14-lot plan really is a reasonable use of land. We calculated the average of all of our lot sizes here for an average of 0.72 acres. You can see on the table on the left. It's R1 single-family zoning. We're not asking for any rezoning. It's very comparable to the lot sizes within the immediate area. This aligns with staff's road configuration map, which I think you might have seen on the staff report, and I can go through in a slide in the future. And no variances are requested except for the trees, which is due to the city's past planning of or taking of the right-of-way. Just another table. I know it looks like a lot, but all I'm trying to point out here is we took an average of all of the neighboring lot sizes within a 500-foot radius from this site. The average in the surrounding neighborhood of lot sizes are 0.66 acres, and we're coming in with an average of 0.72 acres. So again, just trying to show that reasonable use of land specific to this site. This is the quote-unquote official map to suggest street alignment on the east side of Plymouth Road. I think this was designed in the 90s as well, and something that staff had brought up at our last Planning Commission meeting, and we're guided really to use that extension from Emerald Trail. I should note too on this slide, it looks like there are 15 lots that were planned with these parcels that we're reviewing tonight, where our plans are coming in at 14. So now we're going to get into the trees, specifically about the tree preservation plan. It's really great that we've been in agreement with staff on most of the issues. It'd be helpful if we could get on the same page with staff on some of the discrepancies around trees. I know a field visit hasn't been able to be completed by staff, but this is just a map on the left is showing our engineered plans of our removals. So with the WPA area, that oak, woodland, brushland, we're allowed to disturb 25% of the actual area, so it's calculated by square foot, not by like removals of actual numbers of trees. We were coming in at under that 25% threshold, but under staff's review, which is the map on the right, they're showing that we were going over that threshold just because of a difference of how we're calculating trees. So that's what Susan had mentioned earlier, and we're looking to get on the same page with how we're calculating. But because a field site or a site visit hasn't been completed yet, I just wanted to point this out that you can see where the WPA area kind of juts in, like there's an access here, and that's because this is the existing access. Here's a picture of that access. The tree, so why, even though we're saving these trees down on this lower leg of the WPA area that's, highlighted in gray, the reason why staff is calculating these as part of the disturbance is because because we're removing, these trees just to the right of this red circle, they're saying that we would be disconnecting this lower leg from the rest of the WPA area. So this picture shows that this red tree that's circled is this tree with the sign on it. It's likely that this is already disconnected from the WP area, so maybe difficult to, something that we would like to be reviewed is if this whole leg would actually be a part of the WP area. Here's just some other pictures. You can see from just a further away view that this is the tree that's, circled in red that is supposedly connecting this lower portion of the WP area to the rest of the WP area. The picture on the right is showing this grouping of trees that's also circled in red on the map. So I think this will get more fleshed out with a site visit, but just wanted to bring this up here tonight. Again, this is that access that's existing there today. the Planning Commission would like us to tweak some plans, we did respond to, we just had this call, like Susan mentioned, yesterday morning or this morning. So this was news to us, but we, we did respond to that comment about, we could tweak our plans a bit to move the building pad over to save a few more of those trees within the WPA area. If that's something that Planning Commission would like us to do, but however, we would still need a tree variance regardless, even if we were able to save some more trees like this plan is showing. So I just thought I'd bring that up. And I think, so this is the 8-lot plan. So back to our 14-lot plan. So, needing, because the removed access point, needing to buy access, really using those northern properties coming up in at a premium is really what's requiring us to go to the 14 lots. To fall back on that, if the tree variance isn't approved, code does allow us to go to a plan that's 1 unit per acre. And we would not need to follow the tree ordinance with this density of 1 unit per acre. So going down to 1 unit per acre, we wouldn't incorporate the northern properties. We wouldn't need to, since we wouldn't need that access. The county is in support of an access right through the middle of the site. We reworked these plans to stay out of the steep slopes, and would likely come back with a plan just because it just makes more sense to not have to buy the neighbor's property for access, and if this was allowable per code. So I know that staff hasn't had time to review this 8-lot plan. They reviewed a different version of the 8-lot plan. So we respect that there might, be some time needed to review this. And I think that is my last slide. Yeah, this was just a slide showing highlighting the different challenges on the site, starting with the practical difficulty of the Burlwood Road right-of-way vacation, the WPA area that's on the site. This was an older version of the WPA area. We've been provided a more refined area. The floodplain on the site, and then this was when we had I was just showing that retaining wall when we had the Woodbridge Trail right-of-way planned. So that concludes my presentation. Thanks for listening. I'll leave this on the screen, and if you have any questions, either me or my team are happy to answer.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, I'm guessing we probably have some questions. Who'd like to go first? Commissioner Maxwell.
Thanks for that thorough presentation. My question is on access. It sounds like from the county's perspective, or from your perspective, the county would not allow access from Plymouth Road unless it's in the middle of the WPA. So from your perspective, is there any way to have access to the site that's not through the proposal here, through the northern neighborhood, or through the WPA, so somewhere else on Plymouth?
Well, we explored the access like I showed here using Woodbridge Trail. The county was okay with this plan, but did require the unprecedentedly long turn lane. So this would avoid the WPA area to, the tree removal threshold of only disturbing 25% of the WPA area. Does that answer your question?
And then to confirm, anything on the southern side of the lot, the county would not allow because it's sort of at where it is on the hill on Plymouth?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, what we've gotten, our feedback is just they performed a site review, like a site distance review, and that southern access point is just showing it's not favorable. The northern point is really not favorable either, but the southern is less favorable.
Okay, thank you.
And then the middle of the two parcels are the most favorable.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Minion, you have a question?
Nice presentation. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the things that I want to be sensitive to is that the neighbors have put together a number of different issues that they're bringing up. And there's a couple of lots they're concerned about flooding issues. Have there been any discussions, or would you be willing to discussions to maybe do some sort of remediation to help those neighbors out, make sure that they're not having an adverse effect from any construction or additions, changes?
Certainly, we will do everything to avoid any type of issues with neighbors during construction and post-construction. Our engineering team is here tonight, so I know that we've had we submitted a extensive floodplain review and stormwater report. So I think that we're addressing all those issues, but unless there are issues I'm unaware of that the neighbors currently have, but we certainly are considering with, that there'll be an extension from an already existing neighborhood. I think that's why, our other plans were being mindful of not, extending through Emerald Trail, but some positives with this plan is that we likely could use the existing access points for construction, so that construction wouldn't be going through the existing neighborhood to the north.
Sorry, I meant just long-term, if we change the topography, if you guys would be willing to kind of work with the neighbors and do any type of remediation, making sure that it doesn't cause adverse effect on the regards to flooding. I should have said that better, sorry.
No, sorry, I thought you said something about construction, so with that.
Other questions? Commissioner Waterman.
Thanks. Have you, it's kind of to Commissioner Hansen's earlier question to the staff, have you considered eliminating some lots and then getting in compliance with the tree ordinance, the portion that the city currently indicates would be out of compliance? Then you have a conforming plan?
We did consider removing some lots. The majority of the trees on lots 2 and 3, here, if we removed these 2 building pads, we'd likely meet the tree ordinance. We could likely come back and, subdivide that, make this one big lot. It'd be a little not economically efficient to have, a road with house pads on just one side of it and not the other, but if we remove these 2 lots, we could meet the tree ordinance, we think, based off of our calculations, and then have this be one lot. We'd likely come back, in a few years and subdivide that lot off, just to be completely transparent. But if we went down to 12 lots, and if we're able to go to, that 8-lot plan that I had showed with the state lots, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to buy the northern property at a premium just to gain access when we can do the 8-lot plan coming in off of Plymouth Road. Does that make sense?
Other questions? All right. It doesn't look like it, but we may have more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So, before I open the public hearing, I just want to get a gauge. If you can raise your hand if you plan on making a public comment on this item, that'll just help us plan and engage for time. Okay. All right. Pretty reasonable. So, good for the second item. Yep. All right. So I will open the public hearing, and if you'd like to come forward and make a comment on this item, you're more than welcome. We'd love to hear from you. There's no right or wrong order, so everybody will get a chance. If you can give us your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Hi, good evening. I'm Emily Anthony. I live at 12610 Bent Tree Road. I've spoken to the Planning Commission and for previous proposals from prior developers, and I'm here again to talk about concerns around environmental impact. tree preservation and wildlife disruption. I understand the rights of the owners to develop the property consistent with the current zoning and think, there are a lot of enhancements here over what we've seen in the past. But I'd argue, and I support the Planning Commission's perspective that this doesn't warrant a variance from the tree ordinance. The tree canopy and the tree ordinance are differentiators of Minnetonka versus surrounding communities, and I think it's something we should be really proud of. The developer presented the list of public goods that would warrant a tree variance. And from my perspective, I don't see anything there in terms of affordable housing, access to nature or trails, or public utility other than profit to the developer. So I'd respectfully ask the Planning Commission to maintain your position of denying the request for variance to tree ordinance.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. Ashwin Patel, 2431 Emerald Trail, Minnetonka 55305. Firstly, I just wanted to thank all the city staff that we've been calling to get more information on what's going on, and some of the community have reached out to some of the commissioners too, so really appreciate the time you've given us. We have, as a community, put together a petition. It's a couple of pages. I'm going to read it because 6 different people have, in the neighborhood have had input into this, and that way you don't have at least 6 other people coming along behind me. So if that's okay, without further ado, I'll
please
get
do.
right in.
Thank you.
Thank you. We, the residents of Amy Lane and Emerald Trail, wish to bring forth our concerns regarding the proposed development south of Emerald Trail on Plymouth Road, known as Emerald Estates. Previously, it was known as Fredham 31 Edition. The presentation of development plans by Lake West Development and their representative Kelsey on January the 10th at 6:30 p.m. has prompted us to address specific issues with the proposed project. The chosen development option, as shown in the plan submitted to the City of Minnetonka on January 18th, involves opening up our very valued cul-de-sac on the southern side of Emerald Trail into the new proposed neighborhood. This would result in the cul-de-sac, moving to the south side of that proposed development, as depicted in the plan submitted by the developer. While alternative options were presented and rejected by the developer, our community harbors several concerns that we believe need careful and serious consideration. First and foremost is safety. Is a primary concern regarding the proposed development, as it is expected to augment the traffic flow on Amy Lane. I don't know if you guys have been down Amy Lane. Amy Lane's there's 2 houses on Amy Lane and that's it. It's a very small run. Impacting the overall character and safety of our neighborhood. A considerable number of our residents have children who frequently engage in outdoor activities such as biking, playing basketball, baseball, and football in the cul-de-sac. Additionally, many neighbors take pleasure in strolling through our serene neighborhood, and numerous individuals walk their dogs along Emerald Trail daily. The anticipated rise in traffic proposes an increased risk to these activities, raising concerns for the safety of both children and adults within the community. Number 2, and forgive me, I should have said this, you all should have a copy of this, and if you don't, we'll get you a copy of this afterwards. So
We have it, it's in our packet.
Okay,
correct,
thank you.
Mrs. Thomas? Thank you.
The proposed new development, 12 homes using Emerald Trail, will generate increased traffic on the street, leading to congestion at the intersection of Plymouth Road. A detailed traffic study is yet to be provided for thorough analysis of traffic north and southbound on Plymouth Road to analyze the need for a right-left lanes onto Amy Lane. As the developer cited earlier, the county was okay using Woodbridge Trail, but they'd need a right turn lane. So, our question is, why wouldn't we need one into Amy Lane if this proposal did proceed? And then, we're looking at this project as one project, but if you look at our neighborhood, there's another project going on across from Amy Lane. That project is called Woodhaven at Minnetonka, and that involves a brand new road too. So our concern really is you've got to look at this as the sum of the whole versus individual parts, because that's going to be significant traffic flow hitting Amy Lane. Item number 4, tree study reevaluation. The tree study conducted in the development area requires reassessment with a specific focus on healthy tree stock as opposed to a general analysis of all tree stock. consideration of retention of healthy tree stock should be factored into the analysis. A few of us currently treating mature ash trees in our yards for emerald ash borer. Very good. Construction disruption. The potential presence of heavy construction vehicles is expected to disrupt the neighborhood for an extended period. Amy Lane and Emerald Trail are already in disrepair. Multiple cracks and reoccurring potholes, and this additional heavy traffic will further degrade the road surface. The intersection of Amy Lane and Emerald Trail collapses almost every year, and they have to come in and bring it back up. So, and this is just with regular cars, let alone the heavy stuff. Again, existing traffic issues. Amy Lane and Plymouth Road presently serve as bus stops for families whose children are enrolled in different educational institutions through open enrollment or otherwise. Parents often park along Amy Lane, await their children getting off the school bus, and that already, adds to the congestion that happens on Amy Lane. The proposed development is likely to exacerbate the situation. Moreover, there are instances where numerous maintenance vehicles are already parked on both Amy Lane and Emerald Trail, creating challenges in navigation on certain days. The additional congestion resulting from the proposed development raises concerns about the practicality and safety of the areas for families and other residents. And you probably all know this. We're served by several school districts, right? Minnetonka, Hopkins, Blake, Breck, and a host of others, plus Metro Mobility. So all kinds of public transportation or student transportation is going through that neighborhood. Existing water issues. The properties at 2460 and 2456 Emerald Trail already have issues with excess water, especially during the spring thaw and after heavy rain. These property owners fear the new development will exacerbate the situation, especially since the plans submitted on the 18th of January locate the pond farther from Plymouth Road and closer to 2460 Emerald Trail. The developer presented alternative options to the City Council earlier in 2023 that showed them to us in the meeting with the Emerald Trail neighbors, but dismissed them without adequate explanation. These other plans include direct access from the new development to Plymouth Road through an existing driveway and on Woodbridge Trail. These earlier plans would not disrupt Emerald Trail or Amy Lane. Despite guidance from the county and the city, the developer appears to be opting for the path of maximum disruption to our neighborhood and sidestepping investing in turn lanes and retaining walls that would allow for access off Plymouth Road and Woodbridge Trail. There appears to be plenty of land for a road along the north end of the property. One currently exists, the use as an entry into the new development. We strongly prefer that the new development have its own direct access to Plymouth Road. Lake West currently holds an option on the land situated between Emerald Trail and the Fredham 31 addition. In conversation with several residents, Kurt Fredham indicated that he intended to acquire this parcel for stormwater management, designating it as a holding pond. Moreover, he communicated his plan to utilize the existing driveway as the access road for the new development, explicitly stating that he had no intention of routing through the cul-de-sac. However, the current proposal contradicts these earlier assurances, raising concerns and creating a discrepancy between the initial understanding and the presented plans. I'm almost done. Right. 30 more seconds. As long-standing residents of the city and the county, we kindly request that you review our petition and consider alternatives to Lake West proposed plan. Our goal is to preserve the thriving community we've built over the years and ensure that any development aligns with the well-being and harmony of our neighborhood. We would also like to actively participate in the planning process in real time, ensuring that our input is integrated into the planning as it unfolds, rather than being considered after the plans have already been formulated. We would clearly like to state that we don't oppose the development of Emerald Estates. What we are opposed to is the impact on Emerald Trail community we have worked to build over the past 20 years. Attached, you will find the neighborhood signatures supporting this communication, and I think we have all but 3 owners because they're out of town or, signed on to the petition. Thank you for your attention to this pressing matter, and we look forward to thoughtful consideration, and then please sign the neighborhood's signatures attached. So just in summary then, you can see we've showed up here this evening. We're not opposed to development of that property. We're just saying, can we do it more thoughtfully? And when you add both projects going in at the same time, that's going to be an impact on Amy Lane. People are going to make wrong turns. Construction vehicles all over the place. We have our community is children as young as 3 and 4 to our prize senior citizens too. High school kids, graduate school, college kids, and we've got it all. So I just want to thank you for your time. And if anybody else wants to talk from the community, I invite them to talk. But we look forward to more discussion. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Deb Stein, and I'm at 2461 Emerald Trail. And I just want to piggyback off of what Ash addressed with one thing, and that is the studies are being that they're proposing are based on studies from the 1990s, and that's nearly 35 years ago. And in those 35 years, there have been senior development projects that have gone up at Ridgedale, condominiums that have gone up in the Ridgedale area, Whole Foods additions to Ridgedale Mall, the development of the Minnetonka Mills area. So Plymouth Road now is a heavy traffic area. And I think that, in those 35 years, there's been a serious increase in traffic. So putting all that traffic coming, whether you're coming northbound or southbound on Plymouth Road, there has to be some sort of a turn lane. And the issue with addressing the 300-foot turn lane, taking a right going into Woodbridge Trail, why would that be any different? You'd need some sort of turn lane going into Amy Road. And also coming northbound, taking a left into our neighborhood, and then now you're throwing in 14 homes with, you figure, at least 2 cars per home, that's 28 cars, more UPS trucks, more Amazon delivery, landscapers. I mean, there's just, it's a higher end neighborhood, so you have all that goes on in that. And I think it really needs to be taken into account, the traffic. And if it's feasible to not disrupt our neighborhood and go through the center of the property with the 8 homes, that would be, for us, a really great alternative. We are not opposed to developing that land, but we are opposed to the disruption of a community that we've created and the appeal of a Minnetonka neighborhood. And again, the development across the street is, they're proposing, I believe, 5 homes, each on an acre of land. And if that access is directly across from Amy Lane, there's, again, that much traffic. Right turns, left turns, and if you could kind of spread it out, that would be great. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any other final comments on this item? All right, doesn't look like it. We'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, do we have any final questions before? Yes, Commissioner Maxwell.
Yeah, I have a question for staff. The applicant made a statement that I want to know if you agree with, which was that if they meet 1 unit per acre, the tree ordinance would not apply. That's something that the applicant said. Is that true based on our ordinance?
Yeah, Chair Sewell and Commissioner Maxwell, that is in fact true. The tree ordinance, it actually reads that if trees are removed above the threshold set by the ordinance, then the property can only be developed at 1 unit per acre. So another way to read that is, if you develop at 1 unit per acre, the tree ordinance does not apply. So that is a correct statement. All other aspects of the ordinance in terms of, lot size, steep slopes, you got to meet basic engineering requirements, all those other aspects would apply. But that is correct. The tree ordinance would not apply.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Banks.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question for staff. The applicant also mentioned we were able to provide an analysis of the WPA area without a site visit. Is that,
Chair Sewell and Commissioner Banks, I think there's a misunderstanding. Our staff, our forestry staff and natural resources staff, have been to this site many times. We have not been to the site that we're going to see later this evening. We have not gotten to that site previously.
hey, thank you for clearing that up.
Other questions for staff? Yeah, Commissioner Henry.
Thanks, Chair. The applicant mentioned that if they took out the two houses in the northeast area, that potentially they could meet the tree ordinance. And I don't want to put words in the mouth of the applicant, but correct me if I didn't hear it correctly, but then I think you mentioned before, Kelsey, that you said that you could take those out and then you would also like to add those in later on. So I just like to make sure that I heard that correctly, number one, and what would city's opinion be on that, number two? It just seems like that would be an end around to get around the tree ordinance.
Chair and Commissioner Henry, I heard the same thing. The city has no time frame on when someone could bring forward another subdivision. So if Lake West chose to bring forward a subdivision of another lot, we would look at that lot and we will look at how many trees are on that property and whether the subdivision of that property met the tree ordinance. So we would look again at that subdivision.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Well, it's time. Comments, commissioners. We've heard a lot tonight. What do we think? Want to hear some opinions? Yeah, Commissioner Maxwell, I'd love to hear from you.
I'll go first again.
Do you have something you'd like to add?
Yes.
Come on up. Maybe you have answers to a couple of the questions or some additional context. Do you want to provide? Give us your name and address for the record, too, please.
Kurt Fretham, Lake West Development, 14525 Highway 7, Minnetonka. Thank you for allowing me back up here. Thank you for hearing our application tonight. I wanted to address your point. It was just a matter of being transparent. It wasn't a way of trying to circumvent the ordinance. It would just allow us to come back in a second step. And why go through a second step when we can do it now? But I also wanted to point out that the 8-lot backup plan that we've contemplated, if we can't reach an agreement on what's on the table tonight, whether we agree on the percentages or what was staff's and our engineers' percentages on the trees and the removals, we know that the 8-lot plan removes, because we have to put the street in the middle of the WPA, we know that it removes 124 more trees than the 14-lot plan. Now, staff's analysis is usually more aggressive than ours, so the tree count might be higher than 124 when they count it. But, so we're really asking you for a variance on our 14-lot plan to save trees, if that makes sense. I don't know if you follow that logic or not. And we could do the 12-lot plan. We certainly could. But we're paying for that access on the north end from Emerald Trail, which is not really what we wanted to do. We wanted to develop the 2 parcels in the middle, but we don't have access because the main access that we should have on the east side that the city took and gave to neighbors, we wouldn't be having the conversation about a tree ordinance variance tonight if we had the access. So city needs to take some accountability for giving that away. I know it was a mistake, but it was costly. I just wanted to point those 2 items out.
I'm going to actually ask a quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
Did you explore purchasing that land back as opposed to buying the 2 additional lots?
We met with the property owners. I didn't ask the question specifically, but I felt like the answer was not a chance.
Fair enough.
Would-
That answers my question.
Okay.
That was a possibility explored. So, okay.
And they've been to our office several times. Is that
Okay.
right? Yeah, we've had
One of them.
one of them. Okay,
Sounds good. Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right. Commissioners. Commissioner Maxwell, you were ready to go.
Yeah, I'll start again. I think I've started everything so far tonight. This proposal is very important to me. I live just across the street. My children's bus stop is in the existing Woodbridge Trail driveway. So we have to cross Plymouth every morning and every afternoon to get to that bus stop on the east side of Plymouth Road. And about a month ago, one of my kids was almost hit by a car who blew right past the flashing red stop sign on the side of the school bus. And it was just providence that he wasn't hit by that car speeding by. So I really hear you, Ms. Stein, when you're talking about traffic on Plymouth. That is close to my heart. So that, I just want to give you guys that context as I give my comments tonight. I see this really as we need to find a place to save 85 trees. On page 40 of our packet lists out the whole inventory and which lots have how many trees on them. And I agree with the applicant that if you just combined 2 and 3, or you removed 2 and 3, lots 2 and 3, you could make this proposal meet all of the city ordinances. But you still have the issue of the access going through Emerald Lane that is, or Emerald Trail, that is frustrating to the northern neighbors. So I really think that maybe would be the preferred option. The 8-lot backup plan is terrible. We do a lot of like biking and riding up and down Plymouth Road. We've gone up and down Amy Lane with our bikes, and cutting right through the middle of that oak knoll there at the top of the hill would just be an eyesore and terrible for everybody. And I also want to echo something that Mr. Patel brought up, which is the Woodhaven development on the west side of Plymouth Road that's happening, or has been sort of going on at the same time. And I like the idea of considering these two proposals. There's not really a proposal that's come to us recently for Woodhaven, but if I would request an environmental wildlife impact review that would consider both of those lots together. Overall, today I will not be supporting this proposal because of the tree ordinance. I feel there is a way we can meet the tree ordinance without going the nuclear option of the 8-lot backup plan.
Great. Thank you. Commissioners, other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Henry.
Well, I'm glad, Commissioner Maxwell, that you went first, since that you're close to there, and thank you for leading it off. Personally, I don't live next to here, but I think I could speak for all the commissioners here that all of the applications are near and dear to our heart, because this is our community, and we want to make sure that it develops in the best way possible, and that's for the developers. They have the right to develop. That's for the neighbors, and that's for the community at large. And I'm really glad to see so many people here today in support of what they're doing, in support of developing, which is an important part of making Minnetonka what it is, in support of strengthening and maintaining the neighborhoods. That's also who we are. In front of us, it seems like the issue is, well, there's so many nuances to this, but it does boil down to, and I agree with what the city came up with, where it violates grossly the tree ordinance. And for that reason, I cannot support it. That's the short answer. The long answer is that there are a lot of things in play in terms of safety and access through Emerald Trail, which I understand completely with the neighbors. It's really hard to turn a cul-de-sac into another road, and that would alter irrevocably the culture of the neighborhood. Not to say that the new neighbors wouldn't be good, because I'm sure they would be, but that's not the issue that's in front of us. So you're right, there are some other options. The eight house option, I agree that I do not want to break up a woodland preservation area and take out all those trees, even though possibly it's okay to do. I think there are better alternatives. So when reading all the packet, I just thought that this proposal needs to cook a little bit more, because it needs to be a little bit more thoughtfully laid out. And that's in terms of the developer communicating more with the neighbors, they're going to be here for generations. And if not, other people are going to come in. So I'd encourage the developer to reach out a little bit more and to tell the neighbors what the reasoning is. And in my mind, should this lot be developed? Absolutely. And is it possible to develop in a way that's going to benefit the developer? Yes. And as well as the neighborhood? I agree, it could. It doesn't in this proposal, so that which we have before us, it's not something that I can support. But I do encourage more to happen, because I think with a little bit of tweaking, Kelsey mentioned that word before, I agree with that. This is not the time to tweak and say, well, here's a proposal, what do you think about this? There's a set way to do things, and if everybody follows those, then this can be developed in a much more thoughtful way. So I really encourage that to happen, and I'm looking forward to seeing a revised proposal.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Hanson, you had comments.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'll just say this is a pretty fast no for me right now. And probably an editorial comment is that this feels like a second concept review at this point for this project, in the sense of we've come up with alternatives kind of not necessarily on the fly, but that we haven't reviewed, and that, hey, here's this 8-lot option, that's our plan B. That's not what we're here to discuss tonight, I feel like. So to kind of piggyback off Commissioner Henry's comments, like, we're here to discuss this proposal in my mind. And so I'm voting on the proposal tonight.
Sorry, we're done with comments. Let us finish, and then we'll move on, okay? Thank you.
I'd like to comment on
Just hold it. Oh, yep. Hold it for right now. We're talking right now. Thank you.
Yep, so we're here to discuss this proposal tonight, not the 8-lot proposal that's buried in our packet or was presented to us. In addition, while I appreciate the transparency on finding a way to get around the tree variance, then I would want to say, as a body, we have an intent of what we're trying to accomplish, which is manage and maintain that tree variance. So if we did 12 lots or whatever, it's kind of what we have struck as a body, it feels like. So that'd probably require us to understand from the staff, like, how straightforward is that for the developer to come back and do an additional pair of lots, essentially. So I'm a pretty easy no tonight.
All right, thank you. Other commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Banks.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to say, well, first and foremost to the neighbors, great to see everyone come out and give a voice to your concerns and your thoughts on this project. That's always great to see, that kind of support. For the applicant, I do want to point out some of the good things that I do like about what you brought forth. One, we saw this back in late 2023, and I remember from that meeting, there wasn't a tree removal study done at that point, so we weren't sure how many trees were going to be removed. So I like that you have that included in this packet, so we can, for transparency and for awareness of us understanding what that would include. I do like the fact that you very quickly made these changes and was able to decrease the floodplain significantly. I'm not quite sure what that percentage was, but it sounds like it was pretty significant. And then not needing the setback variances and things of that nature that was being asked for in the previous proposal. So there are some good things about this. I do think, however, it does need a little bit more tweaking. I think I voiced my opinion back in the previous proposal about the density. So now we have the density. We still have, we've increased the number of homes by 1, but now we also are coming in from a different road that would impact, and it would impact other neighbors with increased traffic and taking away a cul-de-sac. So, I can't speak to coming in from Emerald Trail. I don't like it, but if you were able to come up with, if you were able to tweak a plan where you didn't reduce the number of trees so significantly, if there was, and I appreciate the transparency, but if there was not a plan to, reduce the lots and then come back and increase the lots, but, if we, could trust that that was not going to happen, I think you could really tweak this and come up with something that both the city, yourselves, and the neighbors could be proud of. With that being said, to eliminate coming in from Emerald Trail, I wonder if we go back to your previous plan proposal. I know it had a lot of gaps, but it seemed to be headed in the right direction, more so than this one. You had a different access point. And again, the issue there was density. I know that there would be more variances required, but there's no access to trails with this new proposal. There's no proposal of a park, so I don't see a public benefit other than for the 14 new homeowners in this division. So with that, I'm going to say no, but I really do hope you guys can get there and come back with something that really works.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Minion, you have some thoughts on this?
Just real quick, I'd like to echo a lot of things that have been said already. I think they've done a good job of saying that. I really like the term "let it cook." Just a little bit more tweaking would be good. It's a nice plan, and I also like to thank everybody that came out and spoke tonight. We're listening. The council cares about you. The commissioners care about you. The developers and the people here. In regards to the roads, it's my understanding, and maybe Lauren can give me a little direction, but it's my understanding that the city goes through and has a 20-year plan as your road as it is degrading a little bit, and then they also have the ability to go through and do testing, so that if your road is degrading faster than you would expect, some people like myself live on silt, so our roads are beat up a little bit easier, a little bit faster. They do readjust that 20-year plan according to need instead of just spending money on a calendar. But I will follow the lead from the other commissioners tonight in my vote. Thank you all very much.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Waterman, do you have any thoughts?
Thanks, Chair. A lot of the same thoughts that my fellow commissioners have had, and I'll start by echoing a lot of what Commissioner Banks was saying in terms of, I appreciate the quick work from the developer on tweaking this. Actually, I know we've seen a couple of revisions of this, and that there is some frustration to that, but then there's also, it's impressive, all the variances that were pulled off of this. I think it sounds like there's general neighbor understanding, and I appreciate everyone showing up and providing the feedback that was in our packets. We do read those letters. We listen to the comments here about the understanding that this is probably a series of developable lots. It just needs to be done with minimal disturbance to minimal permanent disturbance, I should say, to the neighbors around. And I know this is a tricky property. I would agree with a lot of what the city says, though, in terms of the plight is not necessarily specific. There are ways to tweak it, and you could meet really all of the ordinances. So I would be in agreement with the city's recommendation on this. Now, to that, it sounds like you could tweak a few things, like I said, and get to that conformity. I'm still wrestling with the general plan and the contours of it. I think it's still kind of too much density for this area. Definitely appreciate the neighborhood feedback about from those on Amy Lane and Emerald Trail. I live over in this neck of the woods as well, and I didn't read thoroughly the title to my property either, so I could see being really surprised about, oh, hey, the city actually has, I don't know if I probably wouldn't put it the right way, but maybe the ability to allow a developer to make this connection, and that was probably what was intended. I'm not saying I necessarily support that, but I understand that, and we've seen some proposals at the city council where that's a tough pill to swallow, and I could understand why that would be hard. It's possible that the best way to develop this property is with that connection, but the plan on the table is not it. If we were to see a revised plan, I'd be interested in if there's a way to further move lots 3 and 4 a little bit further to the west, allow a little bit more setback to the properties to the east, a little more of a backyard feel there. And I think it was what Commissioner Hanson, what you were suggesting. I feel like if this were to, if we were to just take out a couple lots here, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I think we would see like, oh, there's this outlot that's like, probably there's the intent to redevelop and subdivide. So we'd probably maybe want to shift some stuff around, so that would be impractical. Whatever we come up with, whatever, if this were to ever come back around, I'd like it to be the final, not something that gets reevaluated. So, but overall, I agree with the city's comments and concerns in there, and certainly concerns of the neighbors about just that amount of density has the potential to really adversely impact the neighborhood. But that access point might be needed. I guess the one other point I would say to Mr. Patel's comment and those who signed on to the petition, the previous plan that came before the commission that we didn't do the whole hearing on, it's worth checking out if you haven't seen that, because there was a lot that the city commented on in that pack about why the northerly access straight off of Plymouth Road would create a lot of problems, which that is part of what's having me lean towards this Emerald Trail might be the right answer. But as the plan is presented tonight, I'm not in support of this one.
Great, thank you. Any other final comments from commissioners? No, doesn't look like it. All right, I'll give my thoughts. I think Lake West isn't getting enough credit for all the work that they've done. I think Commissioner Waterman, you were kind of hinting at that too, about the number of variances requested kind of that first time around versus now. That's a huge step in the right direction. And you know, they checked every box except one, and that's an important one in Minnetonka, because we do have a really restrictive tree ordinance. In fact, one of the most restrictive around. But that's not because we like ordinances. Believe me, far from it. It just causes more headaches. But it's based on the community and what the residents of Minnetonka want. If you look at the survey about what makes Minnetonka great, what's 1 and 2? I can't remember if it's parks and trails and then trees, or trees first. Either way, it's up there. And so that's what's driving this, because that's what the residents of Minnetonka want. And so this, the reason we're not meeting the ordinance is because the number of lots that we've chosen to have on here. So again, I think we're probably not too far off. I do think there's going to need to be some traffic study done, especially when you look at the other development across the street. I think Commissioner Maxwell, your point is very valuable, and someone who drives on Plymouth every day also, I can attest to it gets dicey, especially at night in the dark. So I want to be thoughtful about that as well. So but that's just a consideration. It really does come down to the tree variance for me. So I think we're probably ready for a vote, and looking for a motion. And I think the motion would be recommendation the City Council adopt the resolution denying the plat for Emerald Estates at 2503, 2505, 2511, and 2615 Plymouth Road. Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion Waterman.
I'll second the motion.
Second Henry. Staff, please poll the commission.
Hanson,
Yes.
Henry,
Yes.
Maxwell,
Yes.
Minion,
Yes.
Waterman,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
Chair Sewell.
Yes, motion carries. And this is just a recommendation to the City Council to be heard on February 12th. Do I have that date right? Perfect. Okay. Before we move on to item 8B, I think we're going to take a 5-minute recess, if that's okay. Commissioners, would someone like to make a motion to recess?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion Banks, second Maxwell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We will be back in 5 minutes. All right, we will reconvene here for item 8B, items concerning Minnetonka Flats at 5290 and 5300 Spring Lane, 5295 and 5325 County Road 101, and 5301 Tracy Lynn Terrace. And Ms. Thomas, this is your item again.
It is, Chair, but I apologize if we could just take another minute or so. I don't seem to have the right presentation.
No problem.
I'm going to cue our elevator music while we wait.
Where's the power when you need it?
Or Jeopardy. We can have.
Is it on your hard drive?
I saved it. Okay, we'll try this
And
one.
we're back.
Okay.
All right.
So we're going to jump to the other corner of town. This site is located in the southwest quadrant of the city at the corner of Excelsior Boulevard and County Road 101. It's comprised of 5 lots, totaling about 4 acres. There 2 high points of the site are 2 knolls located along the County Road 101 frontage. The grade generally falls towards a wetland along Spring Lane, and then a low point that's located along Tracy Lynn Terrace. Based on the information provided by the applicant, the site contains roughly 145 trees that are regulated by the Tree Protection Ordinance, including mainly box elder, cedar, and spruce trees. Like other properties in the area, the site is guided for low-density residential. It's currently zoned R1. Back in 2015, the city approved a redevelopment of the site, which included a rezoning of a portion of the property to R1A, which allows for small lot, single household developments, about 15,000 square foot lots, and then subdivision resulting in 3 new lots along Spring Lane at just regular R1 standards. So 12 lots were approved. 2 new homes did end up being built on Spring Lane. Lake West decided not to move forward with this particular development proposal. So then you may recall back in 2022, you had a concept plan come before you for redevelopment of the non-Spring Lane portion of the site. And that concept included construction of a 20-unit condominium building kind of right at the intersection of 101 and Excelsior Boulevard. Then renovation of 2 of the existing homes, and then construction of 2 new single households. Generally, and I did include the minutes from those meetings in your report, generally, commission and council members thought that the design of the building was appealing and the housing product was appealing. There were some questions about traffic and buffering associated with that project. I would say there was some mixed commentary about density of the site. So the formal application that's before you tonight reflects and expands on that concept. The proposal is for 2 20-unit condominium buildings. The 40 total units would have 36 2-bedroom units and 4 1-bedroom units. Access to the site would be off of Spring Lane in that northeast corner. To accommodate this construction, obviously, site work would occur. The driveway would be located at roughly the same grade as existing, with then the site kind of built up to the grade of the knoll on the south side. About 10 feet of fill and added to kind of match that knoll, and a similar retaining wall there. Stormwater would be managed in an underground chamber located beneath the visitor parking area. Resident parking would be underground under both of the buildings. Based on, again, on the tree information provided, staff has assumed that the proposal would result in impact to about 64% of the high priority trees on the site. This proposal does require a comprehensive guide plan amendment from low density residential to medium density, a rezoning from R1 to R4, site and building plan review with a few variances, and then a preliminary plat. I should say that all of these kind of build on one another. So you have to, to get the rezoning, the comprehensive plan has to be approved. To get to the site and building plan review, the rezoning needs to be approved, if kind of that makes sense. So in analyzing this, staff focused on two primary questions, which I'll go over now. And the first is whether the the comprehensive guide plan amendment is reasonable. And I'm going to talk first about comprehensive guide plan amendments just in general, because you don't see them very often. And in fact, we've had just 7 requests in the last 10 years. So a comprehensive guide plan, and I apologize for those of you who this is old hat to, but a comprehensive guide plan is the community's vision for itself. And so from a land use perspective, it's a plan that sets long-term goals for our future development. It's intended to guide development decisions to help us achieve that vision. So the plan gives every property in our community a land use designation. And residential designations are in density ranges. So low density is, I guess not 0, something above 0 units per acre to 4 units per acre. Medium density is defined as 4.1 to 12, and high density is essentially over 12. And by law, metropolitan cities are required to update their comp plans every 10 years on the decade. So this was updated in 2020. Lauren just started the new folder for our next update, which will be due in 2030. But the plans can also be amended from time to time as the city sees fit. So in this case, the applicant has requested a guide plan amendment for their particular property. So the guide plan itself includes criteria for the city to use when considering an amendment. But because a comprehensive guide plan and an amendment is a legislative or rule-making function of the city, it sits on the bottom of your pyramid of discretion. That's at the, in every one of your staff reports, you have that pyramid of discretion. The city has broad discretion in the approval or the denial of a comprehensive guide plan amendment. So those criteria are things for you to consider. They're not a, if you check the boxes, you get a guide plan amendment. But conversely, they're not a, if you don't check all the boxes, you don't get a guide plan amendment. It's really for the city to decide if something is reasonable. So that was a long tangent. Back to the question on whether this comp plan amendment is reasonable. And as staff noted in our written report, we don't think it's reasonable for the entirety of this site. We do think that the building design and the owner-occupied single-level living type of use is appealing. We also think that low-density development at that immediate corner of 101 and Excelsior Boulevard, that redevelopment of that area is probably unlikely And so maybe some type of increased density in that immediate vicinity may be reasonable. But the proposal for 10 units per acre density over the entirety, that's in that upper range of medium density. And we don't think that that specific proposal for this specific property is appropriate. We don't think it includes an appropriate downward density transition to the existing low density to the south and the east. And I think you could even argue to the west. These densities here are just under 2 units per acre. So the applicant's narrative does point out 2 important goals that are outlined in the 2040 comp plan, and one of those is to promote projects that include construction of a variety of housing types, and also to promote affordable housing. And obviously staff, we also believe that those are really important goals. We don't think that this project necessarily rises to the level of a comprehensive guide plan amendment in order to achieve those goals. We think that those goals can be achieved even without a comp plan amendment. The second question then is whether or not rezoning from R1 to R4 is appropriate. And again, we don't feel it's appropriate pretty much for those same reasons of not an appropriate transition in land use from things that are currently existing at the corner to things that are currently existing to the south and east. If the comprehensive guide plan amendment is not reasonable, the rezoning isn't reasonable, the review of the site plan with the variances is kind of moot, but nevertheless, I would say that staff doesn't find there's a practical difficulty preventing the applicant from meeting the standards of the ordinance for the setback variances, for the tree removal variances. Again, redevelopment decisions are fully within the purview of the applicant in terms of site design. So with that, I would just end by saying staff does recommend denial of the proposal as presented, and I would turn it back to the chair.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, questions for the staff? Yeah, Commissioner Waterman.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ms. Thomas. I have a handful of questions in no particular order. So one of the residents in our pack talked a little bit about the 2015 plan and how it was sort of agreed upon by the residents at the time. I don't know if you can, I don't know if one resident could necessarily speak for everyone, but are you able to briefly at all comment on 10 years ago is not a long time. Was there general consensus after like the plan came forward and neighborhood support, or was it kind of fighting tooth and nail till the end?
Chair and Commissioner Waterman, is it this plan that we're talking about?
Correct. Actually, my next question is going to be about one of the other plans in there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'll start, and my colleagues can jump in because we were all here. I would suggest to you that at the time that this plan came forward, this was initially also quite controversial, I think. At the time, R1A zoning was a very new zoning district, and so people were concerned about that zoning district in and of itself because it involved smaller lots. These were 15,000 square foot lots in an area that had 22,000 square foot lots. I think ultimately the idea that there were going to be single family homes, now I'm going to go on a tangent again. R1A has a provision that establishes floor area ratios, maximum floor area ratio. So a smaller home on a smaller lot, that ultimately we got to a place where people may have been accepting of that, but it started out in a controversial place.
Great, thanks. Kind of leading to where my second question was going, there was another presentation, I feel like it had like 12 smaller lots. That's what you're talking about? Like that was initially what was proposed and then this is where it landed?
Chair Sewell and Commissioner Waterman, if I'm thinking of the plan that was in the packet, that was an initial concept plan that never came to a formal application. But that was for, very small kind of villa home type lots, yes.
Thank you. Two more. Traffic study I flipped through. Is it an oversimplification for me to say that, like, for this proposal, the traffic study basically said for these 40 units, there are some recommended tweaks that would be made in terms of access, but it didn't seem like it would have too much of an adverse impact on traffic flow, et cetera.
Chair and Commissioner Waterman, no, I don't think that's an oversimplification. The traffic study had kind of three primary conclusions. One, that the existing intersections functioned at a acceptable level of service, which is an engineering standard. That this proposal would add traffic volume, but that those intersections, and the intersections were 101 and Excelsior Boulevard, Spring Lane and Excelsior Boulevard, Tracy Lynn Terrace and Excelsior Boulevard, that the intersections would continue to function at an acceptable level of service. The study did suggest that Tracy Lynn Terrace was probably a better option for access to the site, but that no, this proposal would not exacerbate existing conditions.
Thank you.
That answer all your questions? Okay. Commissioner Hanson, you have a question?
Yeah, maybe just two. First, I'm hoping this is an easy one. In this proposal tonight, to me, it looks like we come kind of off Excelsior Boulevard up into the north end. Is the north end of the north building, I'll call it, the entryway for the garage for both buildings? Is that the right way to read that?
That is my understanding.
Okay,
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something. I don't want to put you on the spot, Ms. Thomas, but like when I saw our map of the, I'll call it with mixed use and commercial, if I look at that right away and I see medium density, borderline literally across the street, and so I struggle with the city's idea of like, well, that's not an appropriate transition, frankly. So if we maybe later, if we zoomed out a little bit to other pockets where there's a semi-major intersection for some of us that drive around all the time, does this look out of place if we stick this like mustard yellow color there all of a sudden? I'm kind of curious just to see if we zoom out a little bit on the western side of the city, does this stand out?
Chair and Commissioner Hanson, I can certainly bring up a map and we can
No
zoom
rush.
around.
Other people have way better questions.
Anyone have better questions than that? Yeah. Commissioner Banks, you have a question?
Thanks, Chair. Just one question. You mentioned that there were 7 previous comp plans that were approved, comp plan changes that were approved. Of those 7, were any from low density to high density?
They were not. I'll pull up the changes just a moment. It's loading.
This is as fun as watching you go on your file path.
Mr. Gordon is also bringing up our comp plan map at the same time.
Perfect.
That's probably why it's taking so long to
While
load.
it loads, can I ask a question? I don't want to distract you or slow down the process, so.
Read it. Do you want me to read it? Okay. So there was a Crestridge Corporate Center office to high density, Glen Lake Apartments commercial to high density, Groveland Ponds office to medium density. Groveland Ponds is on Minnetonka Boulevard. Groveland Elementary went from low density to institutional. Marsh Run went from commercial to mixed use. The Vantage went from low density residential to institutional, and Shady Oak Crossing went from commercial to high density.
Other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Minion, you have a question.
Just a bit of a history lesson. 50-foot setback to a 35-foot setback. Do we have that happening quite often on a road with this much volume of traffic? And I know that there's posted speed limits. I know there's speed limits that people drive. Do we see that a lot? Has that happened quite a bit in the city in the recent past? I know it's a tough question to ask.
Make sure I understand your question, Commissioner Minion. So the difference between 50 and 35-foot setback in terms of the street edge, a arterial road or a collector street. Your question is what exactly? The
Have we seen that a lot in the recent history?
variances, you mean?
Yeah.
I would say from time to time. I wouldn't say it's all the time. I think that, I mean, the idea behind the two different setbacks is obviously the more volume you have, the more infrastructure you need, therefore the more separation from the street that you require for the building. I can think of projects that don't, that haven't met it or have asked for a variance from it, sure, but I wouldn't say it's terribly common.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Henry, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just for my clarification, and maybe for the audiences too, Commissioner Banks, you said you're wondering if what the precedents were to go from low to high density, and just to clarify on this one, it's going to medium density. But is that what you're looking for, or are we looking for specific to high density?
Yeah, so this proposal is to high density, correct? Or medium density?
Medium.
Medium density, okay.
And so the specific request from low density to medium density, we do not have a situation like that. Office to medium.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Other questions? Did you get the view that you were looking for?
Well, I told my daughter that the city staff has a cooler job than I do. I know that
Lot
to be
more
true.
colors.
Yeah.
Clear colors.
Plus, where I work is not cool. So they get to place, city planner and I guess my initial reaction is like, I still struggle with that, and that's just for us to debate. It doesn't feel like totally unreasonable from a transition standpoint, but that's just where my initial reaction to that. So I think if I were to call it out,
8
it's
or 9 o'clock.
Yeah, there's a little red pen sticking out.
It's like colored pencil.
It's just south of Target. So I think where we're talking, the ball pen is pointing at the subject property. So it's helpful, and it's interesting for me to compare like the Glen Lake shopping neighborhood and what that looks like in transitions too, because that kind of feels like a similar intersection in some weird way, but that's just one person's opinion. So
It's like spokes on a wheel almost. Other questions? One question I have is, in the concept plan that we saw for this, we essentially doubled. Was it the building to the north was the same, and they've essentially added the one to the south?
Correct.
And then, sorry, I'm having a hard time remembering. And then there were additional single-family homes in the concept, right? Is that correct?
Correct. In the concept.
Here we go.
Sorry, we have a series of mice running around up here. In the concept, there were two existing homes that would remain, and two existing homes that were proposed, or two proposed homes.
Okay.
In the proposal now, one of those single-family homes still remains, but
Okay.
the other is removed, and no new single-family to be
So
constructed.
essentially, we traded 3 home units for 20 additional
Correct.
condo units. Okay, great. That helps a lot. Thanks. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay. Otherwise, we'd love to hear from the applicant. If you want to come up and offer a presentation, welcome back. Long time no see. If you can restate your name and
Thank you.
address for the record.
Kelsey Thompson, Lake West Development, 14525, Highway 7, Minnetonka. All right. So in developing this 4-acre site at the corner of the County Roads 101 and 3, we asked ourselves and our development team, what questions should we be considering when developing this site? We realized it's really not so black and white. One of the first questions we asked ourselves was, how can we be mindful to the neighbors' feedback from the concept phase? What we heard from them most was traffic and the green space. They wanted to limit disturbances to the traffic and preserve the green space that they're currently used to. So I have on the screen the same plan that Susan was showing from last year, with the 3 single-family homes on the south, the 20-unit building on the north. And what we did to address this issue of that open green space that the neighbors currently used to on the Tracy Lynn Terrace neighborhood to the south was we really left that area unchanged. So if you look to the right, the Tracy Lynn Terrace neighborhood, as you enter, they're really not going to see anything different. We're going to leave all of that green space for adequate buffering and even spruce it up more with more landscaping, more trees, more screening from the medium density residential on the north. The other thing that came up was the traffic. So the traffic study that the SRF did since our concept review, it did show that there was really no impact or low impact onto the traffic. It's not going to change the ways that the roads currently work. It did slightly favor the Tracy Lynn Terrace access by, I think, like 1 second. But what that report really didn't take into consideration was the neighbors' feelings, and that this is, changing the entrance into the Tracy Lynn Terrace neighborhood. So we studied that, where the access should go. The county is not allowing access onto 101 or Excelsior Boulevard. And we felt that the most appropriate place for this access is off Spring Lane. It's really, it doesn't bring any traffic through an already existing established neighborhood. And it's bringing that traffic out onto the county road pretty directly. So we find that this is the best access on to Spring Lane versus Tracy Lynn. Again, trying to be mindful to the neighbors' concerns. The traffic study also didn't take into account the product type that we are proposing here, which is this one-level living. We kind of coined it as a townhome flat, which is really a townhome condo hybrid. So they are condos, one-level living, but they live more like a townhome, which I can get into more once I go through the design and character of the buildings. But this product type is really marketed toward empty nesters. So typically their travel patterns aren't during the peak travel times, even though the traffic study did do their report based on if these were, just normal 40 units of condos. So they didn't take into account that this is geared toward maybe more of a aging demographic or empty nesters that would have different traffic patterns. Additionally, we are removing an access off of County Road 101 where it serves a single family home. So an improvement to County Road 101. And I don't know who mentioned this, but I think it was Chair Swall. You mentioned that, so we're removing the single family lots and putting another 20 unit buildings to make a 40 unit condo flats, townhome flats product. The other question we considered was, how can we create a low intense use to limit the impact on traffic and the neighborhood? So here's that zoomed out version of the map that you were looking for, Commissioner Hanson. So this question was, how can we not only cater to the appropriate transition in land use, but how can we generate less traffic during peak times? Like I just mentioned, with Minnetonka's aging population and demand for this product type, more one-level living, the life cycle housing, and the location of this site in particular being on these 2 county roads, with the other 3 corners being commercial and high density residential, we responded to this question with the condo townhome hybrid product type. Again, this will have lower impact on traffic and a much lower intensity use. We did consider, what other uses would be appropriate for this site. Would it be commercial like the other three corners, or even a high density like Commissioner Banks maybe thought this was? But we really found it appropriate for this to be R4 medium density with the density at 10 units an acre, so 40 units on 4 acres of land as appropriate use. Our next question is in response to what we heard at the concept review phase, really that the devil is in the details when it comes to environmental impact. So we considered how can we minimize the impact to the environment and enhance the natural ecology and allocating an abundance of open green space and spatial separation. So removing that single family component and adding another building of townhome flats for a total of 40 units, again, leaves the south of the property untouched and preserves over half of the site's natural ecology. So this is an illustrative site plan that we put together. This plan creates 85% open space, and of that being 69% green space. So it's really a green initiative, which we think is the new industry standard. The attached product type also allows for more energy efficient and green technologies to be used during construction. It uses less energy overall for residents through the use of shared walls and less area per square feet. We found some information off of the Environmental Protection Agency that really talks about product types and how that can be more sustainable. And just overall, the report through the Environmental Protection Agency talks about how attached products are just much more sustainable than single-family homes. Not only will we preserve much of the natural ecology, but our plans will enhance it with tree plantings and landscaping, providing, like I said, more screening and buffering. We're also proposing in this a wood chip nature trail with swinging bench, bird viewing areas, flower gardens, a recreational area for maybe it's like a smaller dog park or dog relief area, or a pickleball court perhaps. We discussed, an opportunity for a community garden for the residents here. We've got a pool, a hot tub that's central to the development, a grill area, and a fire pit that overlooks the abundant natural space and wildlife. Here's some renderings of the amenity space with the pool area overlooking the wetland, fire pit and grill area. To touch on the spatial separation, we considered looking at the area. This is the map on the left shows our parcel highlighted in red just for context. So if you go up 101 and take a right on Highway 7, you're at the Carl LaSalle place. This is 84 units approximately. I just hand counted. It comes in around 10 units an acre, and this is a medium density development next to a single family development, and you can see the spatial separation between, historically what's been approved in the past, 105 feet at the nearest to 115 to 135 feet. Here's another example. This is Hunter's Ridge, which is on the other side of the high school from us. You can see again our parcel highlighted in red on the east, and then over on the west, this portion of Hunter's Ridge it has 21 units per building, so overall 63 units. It comes in at a medium density, it's R4, and this is also next to a single family neighborhood, that Valley View Road neighborhood, and the closest building is 95 feet away, 150 to 160 feet. So this is just some examples historically that's been approved and what works in the immediate area. Our spatial separation really comes in a lot more than what we've seen historically around from the other medium density to R1 in the immediate neighborhood. So Lake West does own the house that's called out where the measurement is from 133 feet away from the townhome flats. So we don't think those neighbors are going to have an issue, but it's coming in at 181 feet to the nearest non-Lake West owned resident, 217 to the next resident, and then 304 feet across the wetland to the backside there on Spring Lane. An abundance of spatial separation. So this next question, we considered, took some digging into the Minnesota League of Cities Handbook and other sources. We asked, how can we provide an intuitive transition in land use from the high-intensity commercial to the low-intensity residential at the intersection of two busy county roads? Again, it's just not so black and white when we're considering all of these different things. So using the land use map, you can see the high-intensity commercial use over at the 7 High, where the target is. It's outlined in pink, to more of the medium to high intensity commercial use between Excelsior Boulevard and 7, which is more highlighted in purple. Then the immediate corner of Excelsior and 101, where you're getting to the corner of this site, and commercials on the other 3 corners, as well as a high density residential. So being sensitive to the R1 single family neighborhood to the south, while still considering the location on 101 and Excelsior Boulevard and the site's proximity to the higher intensity land use, the R4 medium density provides a transition as you come down 101. The land use chapter of the comprehensive plan states, the integrity of existing single-family neighborhoods will be preserved through careful management of land use transitions and impacts between potential conflicting uses. So we asked ourselves what would be a conflicting use, and we looked to the Minnesota League of Cities handbook for language on this, and in their handbook in chapter 13 it states, by creating zoning districts that separate uses, the city assures that adequate space is provided for each use and that a transition area or buffer exists between distinct and incompatible uses. They go on to talk about incompatible uses being more like commercial with residential. So this medium density, low impact, low intensity, residential use next to a lower R1 residential use is compatible. The comp plan goes on to state the goals of medium density residential, which we considered and addressed, specifically how to create an appropriate transition between different and more intense land uses in low density areas. So that's bullet point number 2. And this is the appropriate transition with low intensity land use and in the low density area. So historically, the transition in land use from medium density to low density residential has been approved. This again is those 2 examples I called out earlier. So Carlisle Place, again, is over on 7 and 101 just to the east. So on the right-hand side, Carlisle Place is next to R1, and it actually is, serves as a transition from the commercial to the single family. And then Hunter's Ridge is on the left, again on the other side of the high school, another example of medium to low density residential. So again, just showing that this is a compatible use and transition. Another question about the intuitive transition is where does the zoning change, or where does it break? So if you take a look on the left corner, an intuitive transition is at the road. So there's the commercial on the corner, and it goes all the way, that's a regional pond, it goes all the way to the road, where the single family starts. So on the right, you see that that's the intuitive transition of where that R4 would then break to go into the R1. Another question we asked ourselves is what does the comprehensive plan say? What are the city's goals, and are we meeting the housing goals for affordable housing and growing demand in life cycle housing for the aging demographic and empty nesters? I've already called out some goals from the comp plan. Susan also mentioned a few of the goals that we expressed in this presentation. So providing the the needs for the growing population. I think some facts that we found on the comprehensive plan is that Minnetonka anticipates an increase of over 7,500 new residents and almost 5,000 new households by 2040. This product type allows for empty nester demographic who want to transition out of their two-story single typical family home, providing housing stock for younger families to come in and stay, and for the empty nesters to stay in their community. To prepare for this shift, the comp plan does state, which I put on bold and italicized here on the bottom of the screen, that the city will need to work with and encourage developers and housing providers to develop a variety of housing types at various costs and rents with features that cater to the diverse and changing desires and needs of its senior population. We feel that even though this is not senior like restrictive, we are catering to that empty nester aging demographic. We also are providing the 4 units of affordable housing with this as required by the city. So with this address, we also thought, what else could we consider? The question we asked is, how can we carefully develop a product that looks good and complements the community and character of the surrounding area? So I think you recall some of these renderings from the concept review phase if you were here. To address this, we hired a local architect with direction to create a transition in land use from commercial on the adjacent corners with a welcoming residential feel and low intensity use that connects to the broader single family neighborhood to the south. So we designed a 1-level living product that acts like a condo but lives like a townhome, and that there's not a central common corridor like a typical condominium building would have, but instead has more of these like semi-private shared accesses where you would just walk in and either go left or right to your unit. And this is a 2.5-story building, 20 units in each building, 2 of them, which is totaling 40 units. There is underground parking for both buildings, and that underground parking chassis extends for the length of the entire 2 buildings, and then a surface level smaller parking space for guest parking with easy access to the amenity space and the buildings. The units themselves will be between 1,400 and 2,200 square feet, mostly 2-bedroom, some with 2+ den. The architectural style is of modern European, derived from a more classic style, but brought up to date with more modern materials to provide a quality and timeless design. The pitched roofs are designed to make it look more like a single-family house, with the height not to exceed a typical single-family home of 35 feet. And here's just another rendering. So the final question we had to consider was, how can we bear the impacts of the County Road 101 reconstruction takings for tree removals and loss of land mass needed for the setback requirement? So the County Road 101 taking, you can see on the image to the right, this is an exhibit showing where the property line was in red to where it is now in yellow. So the county took 15 to 20 feet of landmass, that swath all along our property, along County Road 101. With that taking, 32 trees were removed, and of those trees, 9 were high priority trees. This is an estimate based off of our land survey that we had from prior to the taking. So without this taking, there wouldn't be a need for a high priority tree removal variance of the 5 trees and a setback variance of 15 feet. And I'll note that because of this taking, now the house that currently exists on the corner is 25 feet approximately from the road. So with all these questions to consider, we thoughtfully designed this plan that we're discussing tonight. If you have any questions, either myself or our development team is here tonight to help answer. We've got Nick Meyer from Westwood. He is the engineer and landscape architect who's been working on this site plan with us. And Kurt is here again. And we thank you for your time reviewing this and for your deliberation.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, questions for the applicant? Commissioner Mindy, do you have a question?
First off, it's a beautiful looking, you guys did a great job. And I commend you on your stormwater system and reuse. That's great, love to see it. My big question is fitting into the neighborhood. You said not to exceed a 35-foot for full height. What is that in relationship to the houses around it? I have to admit I drove the property, but I did not dial into the house heights around it. Can you kind of speak to that at all? Is what you think those heights are in relationship to where you're at?
I might divert this question to staff if you have maybe some feedback.
Chair, would you like me to answer that?
I would like you to answer.
Yeah, okay. We will, I don't have those. 35 is the allowable height, Chair and Commissioner Minion, for single-family homes. We would allow homes up to that height. We can certainly take some measurements while others have questions and get back to you to let you know what existing homes are.
Basically, I'm just looking at how well it fits into the neighborhood in comparison to the other houses around it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Other questions? No? Commissioner Waterman, you have a question?
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit. So it's very different from the concept plan, obviously, and it sounds like you were trying to incorporate some of the feedback. It's so different from the concept review. So like, is it really just the green space? Because there's actually a lot of green space in the other one. I don't think that the entrance has really changed. Is it really just, we just want to add more density? Like more units?
Sure, I can speak to that. So this plan doesn't do a good job of showing the change, because if you come off of Tracy Lynn Tarrant on the plan on the left, what we were, reviewing in the concept, I mean, this puts an access off the Tracy Lynn Terrace. You can faintly see it. And so there'd be an access that serves those single-family homes. So it would remove quite a bit of green space in that area from what the neighbors are currently used to for that hardscape. And then this plan is also not showing the building pads, where the houses would go. So it's not apples to apples in comparison. The plan on the right saves more trees than what we had at the concept review with the two buildings of 40 units.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
This is definitely more of a green initiative on the right-hand side.
Where would construction conceivably enter and exit? Construction vehicles?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer to that at this time. I could ask my development team if we've...
Spring.
For the proposed access, Spring Lane.
Right okay. Actually, maybe on 101? Okay. Talking about Spring Lane, one of the items in the traffic study, it kind of mentioned how it's sort of an awkward turn from Spring Lane, and I can't remember, it was saying you go up and then descend into the parking garage. Is that at all a concern? Like sort of a kind of creating a dangerous intersection, or just some blind spots to like turn into the property, go up and down, and then into the garage, such that Tracy Lynn Lane might be preferable? Not that that's what I'm advocating.
Yeah, the traffic study that was performed, I think stated, some different items about this access off Spring Lane, and ultimately, did you want to speak to this, or?
I could.
Okay, sure. I can have Nick speak to this. It's his, site plan design. Sure.
Can you give us your name and address for the record first?
Yes. Nick Meyer, Westwood, 12701 Whitewater Drive, Minnetonka.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess to answer your question, we would be, driving up Spring Lane a little bit, and then you would sort of, gradually go up into sort of the parking lot. But I mean, as you pull into the parking lot, and then, you know, as a guest, you know, you're going to see the parking stalls right there, and so you're just going to pull in and park right there. Or as a resident, you're going to turn and begin to make that turning movement, you know, down and into the parking garage. But I think knowing these turning movements, I mean, you're going to be going, you know, 5-10 miles an hour. I mean, it's not going to be a, you know, a race or anything like that. You know, you're knowing your home, right? Like when you pull in your driveway at home, you know, you do a nice turn, you stop, you open, you let the garage door open. So it'd be much the same thing here. You know, you're pulling slow, easy turning movement down into the parking garage as the garage door opens.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Hanson, you have a question?
Yeah, maybe can you just talk to us about your thoughts on the parking with the two buildings? Like I feel like in the original plan we had one parking lot for one building, like guest parking wise, and now we're at two buildings with still that one, I'll call it guest parking lot. So I would be curious to hear what your thoughts are on guest parking.
Sure.
And if you feel like you're adequately parked.
Yes. So this plan, we are able to put more stalls underground, so the need for surface level parking is minimal. So each unit will have 2 stalls per unit, and then providing just some space for the guests to still just intuitively pull up and, you know, park if you're going to go hang out at the pool for the day. So we studied this. We're meeting, you know, the code as it reads for parking and adequate, you know, surface level guest parking space. Good question.
I have a follow-up question to that. If you were to reduce the size of the parking lot, could you save trees by doing that?
I think so.
Yes, I mean, we could save trees. I think it's that balance of sort of, you know, meeting sort of the parking requirements. I mean,
Sure.
and we want to make sure that we have adequate, you know, guest parking for our guests. I think, you know, that's the last thing. You know, we talk about, you know, how important it was for us to listen to sort of the neighbors and everything. The last thing we'd want is, you know, guests coming and parking on the streets themselves and sort of impeding, you know, sort of the residents of the neighborhood.
Other questions, Commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Minion, you have another question?
You bring up a good point. How do you see this operationally, being that you're marketing towards a more mature client, and they have guests? Are those guests going to be able to use the parking garage below? I see the surface parking is kind of helpful for Amazon, UPS, that type of a thing. Would that be operational? Would they be down below, or would they be on the surface as well?
Yeah, I don't know that we thought about it to that level at this junction, but certainly just like any underground parking facility, you likely will need a fob to get in. It's going to be a secure building. The residents can certainly allow for their guests to enter in and use one of their spaces that's allocated to their unit, for sure.
Chair, if I may jump in
Please do.
to answer Commissioner Minion's question. Mr. Gordon and I have measured. The homes in the area range from probably 25 to 35 feet in height. There are a lot of split level homes there.
Would it be safe to say that they would blend well?
From a height perspective, they would be similar in height.
Thank you.
Well put. Other questions? Commissioner Henry, I think you had a question, right?
Sure, thanks, Chair. Just to build on Commissioner Minion's line of questioning too, maybe the more clarifying question would be, do you plan to have any guest parking underground?
I would have to look at the parking plan to see if there is space for guests. I think the way that we have it designed is just that would be for, you know, two stalls per unit, but not like specifically like guest only spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Commissioner Minion brought up a really good point, because if there are friends of the people who are living here, if they're empty nesters, they may have accessibility challenges too, where they wouldn't be able to park outside and climb stairs, for example. So if there was a guest parking underground, you could do elevators and it would be easier to get there. Just something to consider.
Yep, and we have elevators in this building. That's how, you know, you get up to, well, there are stairs as well, but built elevators, as well as it's all ADA accessible, taking into consideration of.
We've got stalls located centrally here on the building, and then all of the rear unit access points all have ADA ramps. So you can enter and then get on the elevators for all the units.
Thank you. Another question is about parking, and this picture illustrates it well. Can you clarify that on the left-hand picture, the original proposal, or the previous proposal, there was roughly 10 guest parking spaces above ground, is that right? And then the new one has 14? I see it has 14 on the right-hand side picture, but I don't see a number, but I just counted 10, roughly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably about accurate. You know, that was a concept level plan, so the parking schematic, the architect hadn't figured that out, and so after further design, you know, we realized we can fit more parking stalls underground.
Okay, thanks. Last my questions now is in the left-hand picture, it shows that wetland is more of a delineated wetland, and on the right-hand side picture, I think it's just a matter of how you illustrated it, but
Yeah,
just
the
to-
illustrations are just different. Yeah, it's
Right,
not
so
apples
to
apples.
clarify, nothing was changing with the wetland?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Banks, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, yeah, just one question. Well, actually two. So will this be rentals and for sale, or all for sale?
Great question. Just for sale.
Okay. And what's your price point for these units on average?
Sure. I'm looking to Kurt on this question. 7 to 8.
7 to 8.
I'm guessing that means
700 to
100,000.
800,000. Yeah.
7 to 800,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you.
Ms. Wishnek, for the affordable ones, just out of curiosity, how does that translate for a purchase property like this?
Sure.
What would those look like? Just out of curiosity.
Chair Sewell, 10% of the units are required to be affordable when they're in a condominium. It goes up to 80% of AMI is the calculation. So that's quite a low purchase price compared to the, I don't have the exact math in front of me, but let's just say it was a single family home. We would be in the 300, I believe 310 area for acquisition total price.
So less than half the cost of the market rate, we'll say.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. I was just curious because we've seen it a million times for rental over the years, but haven't seen it for purchase for a while. Other questions? Commissioner Henry, you have another question.
Oh, thanks for letting me jump back in. But to piggyback on your question, you mentioned before that there's of the 40 units, there's going to be 36 of the 2-bedroom, I think you said, and then 4 of 1-bedroom. Is that correct?
I don't know the exact numbers on 1 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms, but approximately.
Okay. And is that also the delineation between the market rate housing and the affordable housing, or are those going to be randomly assigned?
Yeah, it's going to be like really randomly assigned. I'm not sure exactly. I'm sure there are requirements around what units like are the units of the affordable. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? I have a question. So taking a double click, and you did a good job, I think, of laying out the case for the zoning and the comp plan. I'm curious is about the site plan. First with the trees, how far, let me rephrase this, how many trees short are you of meeting the tree ordinance?
Yeah, Nick could speak more to this.
I saw it as a percent, but I'm just curious from a practical standpoint. Like,
Yeah, so there's some discrepancy in the trees and how we're measuring trees from, us as the applicant with our engineer. We submitted a variance for the trees for just 5 over on the high priority trees. But with staff's review, I think those numbers may vary. So
Ms.
or may
Thomas, do you have
differ.
maybe this is maybe a question for you, since I guess they have to meet the city's definition of the tree ordinance.
Correct. The city's, based on the information that was provided, we are suggesting that, or we are making the assumption that 64% of the high priority trees are being removed. We allow 35% of the high priority trees to be removed. What that number is, I'll have to
Okay, yeah, I
bring
need the
that
answer
up,
this
but,
second,
but that's
but-
a significant discrepancy. When we had our conversation yesterday about tree data, I understand that tree data will be provided. That's there's another tree inventory that's being done as we speak.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then my other question is in terms of the setback variance request. Let's see, it's up a 15 feet difference, right, between meeting the setbacks and not meeting the setbacks. That feels like a kind of a margin of error where you may be able to shift some things and move things around to make that work. What's preventing you from meeting that that setback?
Yeah.
I know the county took the land. I totally understand that, but they took the land after you or before this proposal. So I'm just curious, what in the design is kind of keeping you from meeting that?
Sure.
I guess-
we can tag team this, I guess, if you wanted to chime in. Otherwise,
Yeah, I guess I would start. I think it all sort of builds on each other. Sort of all three of these items, and I think it really lends itself from the initial site design on how do we minimize sort of our impact to sort of the natural environment. Trying to limit our impact on sort of the wetland, the trees. How to be a good neighbor and really preserve sort of that buffer. And then how to blend into surrounding context. And so to us, that meant really sort of pushing that building, up into the corner of that intersection. And so in doing that, we looked at the surrounding uses. And I think sort of the existing house right there is 25 feet from sort of the setback. But then we look at the daycare across the street, that is 30 to 35 feet from Excelsior Drive. And we look at sort of the Havenwood across the street, same thing, that is 30 to 35 feet from Excelsior. So I think, there's definitely, not all the libraries not, but there's definitely similar uses with similar setbacks, right at the same intersection. And so we felt like that made sense to sort of match that to minimize our impacts. Specifically sort of how we have things orientated now, sort of we're right at that 35 and sort of we have our building, then we have the parking lot. And then so if we were to start shifting it, we would be shifting closer to sort of more impacts on the wetland, more impacts on the trees. So we're trying to push stuff up there to really preserve sort of that buffer to all the surrounding homes. And as Kelsey mentioned, sort of with that, how we positioned it now, basically that existing lot on Tracy Lynn, that platted lot that we saw on the concept phase that could potentially have been sort of a whole single family home built out, taking out that, the vast majority of those trees. We've basically preserved that entire lot in its entirety to sort of save all those trees. And I think that's, like Susan said, we've submitted sort of our data and stuff. The city hasn't had an opportunity to sort of go out and review the trees yet. So I think, once that happens, we're more than, happy to sit down and sort of look at their data, look at our data and see where those discrepancies sit. But I think really this was sort of acknowledged on the call that, this isn't a real healthy, pristine woodland. I think when we sort of look through sort of that whole Excel sheet of all the trees that were surveyed, there's tons of Siberian elm, buckthorn, sort of invasive species. There's big pockets of it all across the site. 25% of the site is ash trees. As we know, they're dying all across the city. I think of, my office complex. They were in there clear cutting sort of the whole boulevard, earlier this year. And so, I think if we look at sort of the health of the forest and stuff, over time, sort of this canopy, this woodland, all these dying trees, it's going to continue to deteriorate. And so with this project, we've actually got we're proposing new trees on the landscape plan, actually more trees than we're removing across the whole site, whether they are healthy trees or disease trees.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Hanson, you have a question?
Yeah. One last question. Thank you. That's helpful. I'm trying to, balance your perspective of where do these buildings sit relative to the neighbors and to the road, and then kind of picturing it, being, I'll say it 15 feet closer to the road, for in whatever way you want to interpret that. Who's going to maintain? Is there an HOA here that maintains the outside appearance of the building? So, like, I think about the number of cars driving by, like, this doesn't fall into this weird state of, it doesn't look that great from the road anymore, but today in our packet it looks great, but 30 years from now, is it going to look great, and who's responsible for that?
That's a great question, something that we considered, especially when designing these buildings and creating more of a timeless appeal, and to really fit within the neighborhood. And with the high quality of this construction and this product type, we do plan to have an HOA. The HOA will maintain the landscaping and keep up on all that for sure. I think that's a great point you bring up.
Answer your question. Great. Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Minion, you have another one?
I have to admit that the change in the setback bothers me a little bit, more on a public safety, being that it's an intersection of two fairly busy roads. But I really applaud you on the landscaping plan and the addition of the more trees. Will you just speak a little bit to that? I'm thinking, like, do you have a larger, more substantial trunk that could offer a little more protection if a car loses control on an icy day? Or could you speak a little bit to, like, the varieties along there? The plan that you put out there was really good. I didn't really see the species of the trees. Just kind of a quick comment of what you see planted along the road.
Yeah, I think, preliminarily, everything hasn't been assigned yet, each specific tree and stuff like that. But, I think really we're, speaking to sort of the ecological side. I think there's a lot of ash trees and stuff like that. And we see, a lot of older developments with sort of the monoculture plantings and stuff like that. And so now we're going to be planting a lot of sort of hardy, native, climate-resistant species. Your oaks, your birches, your maples, your lindens, elms, sort of all native species. And yeah, I think really sort of the idea is really to create sort of, a really nice streetscape. I think the renderings begin to sort of illustrate that. But yeah, we'll have, as it shows, lots of sort of large overstory trees that'll sort of be in that green space between sort of the building and the street and the trail.
I should mention a couple of things to piggyback off of Nick, because this is a really great question that you bring up. The renderings themselves don't show adequate landscaping because we're trying to see through, right, and actually look at the buildings themselves. So these renderings aren't a very good example of the trees that would be planted. Also along this side of County Road 101, there is a sidewalk, and we have trails throughout, our development that would then connect to that sidewalk. So.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right. Doesn't look like Mr. Fretham, now's your chance. You sure? Okay. Just want to give you the opportunity. All right. We may have more for you. Great. Thank you. All right. Before I open the public hearing, just so I can keep us kind of moving along, can I see a show of hands who here would like to speak about this item? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, plus we have a few on the phone. Okay, all right. So there's several people who want to speak, which is great. But again, we're staring down the barrel at 9:30. Been here almost 3 hours. So if we can make sure we keep our comments brief, that would maybe just help everyone, make sure everyone has appropriate time to comment. So I'll go to the people in the audience first, then I'll go to those on the phone after that. So we'll open the public hearing. If you want to come forward and offer any comments, there's no order, doesn't matter. You can just give us your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Thank you. Sam Rayner. I live on 5420 Tracy Lynn Terrace in Minnetonka. Thanks for having us. This is my first Planning Commission meeting. It's been a really cool experience. It's wonderful to watch our tax dollars at work with people who truly care about the well-being of our community. My fiance Abby and I recently moved into a home in Tracy Lynn Terrace. It's the first home we've purchased together, and we've had a great experience within the neighborhood. As some of the youngest neighbors in the neighborhood, we feel pretty strongly against the proposal, as we see a lot of negative impacts with the proposal. I do think the property owner had a really compelling presentation tonight, and I can't help but think that if the proposal were to be approved, it would be the start of a continued encroachment into our neighborhood on the south side of the property. I thought it was really strong. I felt really strongly it was important to voice my concerns. Number one, I think adding zoning density encourages existing neighborhoods to be torn down one house at a time. At 700 to 800,000 per unit, I'm just wondering, how does that incentivize future teardowns in our neighborhood south of the property? Adding zoning density to residential neighborhoods encourages absentee owners to replace homeowners, which destabilizes our neighborhood. Increasing density in a residential neighborhood could increase crime, and I'm concerned about that with the added units and added traffic in our neighborhood. Most importantly, I think the added density has the potential to clog the streets with parked cars on the curb. There's very limited guest parking, and I think some of the points made around construction equipment accessing the property on Spring Lake are maybe a little bit naive. That turn off of Excelsior into Spring Lane is really awkward, and we've already had issues with that over the last couple of weeks. There's another single-family home being constructed on Spring Lane, and a lot of that traffic has actually entered through Tracy Lynn, and it's torn up a lot of yards in our neighborhood. So I think there's a little bit of a concern there as well. Ultimately, the change in density zoning could disrupt our neighborhood, and that's our ultimate concern. I can appreciate that the property owner wants to develop their property, but I sincerely hope that you all take the concerns of me, my fiance, and my neighbors seriously. It's a really wonderful neighborhood that's been really welcoming of us, and I'm of the opinion that the proposed rezoning will have a negative impact in the future of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Hello, good evening. My name is Alan Au. I live in 5320 Spring Lane, and thanks for the opportunity, to provide some comments here. So thank you, the city planning staff, for doing such a great job in terms of analyzing and providing such a good overview of the situation, as well as the developer. I'm opposing to this development, and there is a neighborhood letter that is in the packet. I just want to give you my personal comments relating to that. One is that when I moved in 2017, so that was actually part of that 2015 approved plan. So I was living in the west side of that development. And then now I realized that it is no longer R1, proposed zoning is R4. So as residents, trying to move in, we rely on the validity and the stableness of those zoning requirements. I was pretty shocked to first hear that, oh, so now the developer has changed his mind, and it's a 20-unit condo. And then 12 months later, it's a 40-unit condo. I was shocked. I also see that, as a community, we really expect that homeowners or property owners who owns the current lots to maintain the lot. So some of the comments about some of the trees are overgrown and with buckthorns, I have it too. I take a good time to make sure that buckthorns are being thrown away and make sure trees are well maintained. So I understand the reason from the developer's perspective to have this development to remove those, but I think the owner of the property should have been in the first place having a good maintenance of the current properties instead of using, perhaps in my opinion, of a development, using those as a reasons for support of this development. Three, the neighborhood is really intended for families. So we saw some of the new neighbors that are moving in. Welcome. So there are 3 schools that are very nearby in this very important intersection, right? So Clear Spring Elementary, we have Scenic Heights, we also have the Minnetonka High School. In addition, there is the Excelsior KinderCare, there is the Primrose Schools of Minnetonka. They are, my son actually grew up, with one of those daycare centers there. And then there is the South Lake Pediatrics close by. So I remember maybe 12 months ago, there was a similar meeting here. One of you was commenting on the fact that this is really a kind of a family-style neighborhood. And I do agree with that, because some of the new neighbors coming in, they are neighbors, they are families, kids coming and playing on the street. I just don't believe that the current proposal is suitable for this application. And I think also that, I think about if the development is going to be for single-family homes, it will actually alleviate some of the bus driver shortage, because I realize that if it is such a close by for the schools, it actually helps those neighbors who move in here to not having to drive as much further to the different schools. So I think that would be also a benefit for that. Trees and environment. When I saw the plan, I was a little bit heartbroken, only to the fact that there's a lot of wildlife within the community on those exact areas. I think it was noted in the letter there. Trees will be cut, understood, because of the development, but it takes years for those to be redeveloped. I can remember, I can still say it now, is on the backyard, I'm able to see some of the wildlife in the trees. But if those are removed, I'm sure that the neighbors will also be disappointed to see what we love about Minnetonka is going to be disappearing. I want to make a comment about some of the depiction about the kind of the backside, the parking lot and the swimming pools. It doesn't seem that it's fitting into as a fair transition from a zoning. I understand about the amenities that needs to be fitting to the proposal, but it just doesn't feel like it is a fitting to me from the, ultimately when everything is built, from the transitioning from an R4 to an R1, from a condo to, I would expect it will be something very wooded, similar to what we have been seeing in Minnetonka. Traffic. Understand that the study is saying that it's minimal impact, but I want you to note that that intersection is already one of the highest in traffic. So there is a lot of 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds that are driving in and out of high school. If you trying to be there, you realize how chaotic, especially around 7:30, 8 a.m., 8:30. So it's already pretty stressed. Understand that the additional incremental may not be having, from paper, it does not add to incrementally worsen the situation, but it's already pretty busy. So I hope that you will understand that any major development in higher density neighborhood building is going to negatively impact the already chaotic situation for the kids. Not to mention, and I do not know about the engineering study if they have incorporated, there are school, walkers that are going to the school. There are people that will be going on school activities in between the hours. And also some of the nuances of people trying to drive around the neighborhood just to make sure that we can access the major roadways, to get to work, to get to school. So some of those things I do not know if the engineering study incorporates to some of those demographics. That is my comment. Just so you know, I counted the number of signatures on that letter, 40 unique signatures, representing 118 residents. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. So Terry Getch, I'm at 5333 Spring Lane. So I'm Alan's neighbor directly across the street. So this would essentially be across the road from us. There's a lot of stuff. Alan has done an outstanding job, and I highly recommend. I believe the commission has already reviewed the product that he's created, but we've had numerous meetings from a neighborhood perspective. There's additionally been other individuals that have wanted to sign, but actually left early from this meeting just because of the length of the meeting. There's the significant concern, my wife and I moved to the neighborhood, 2 years ago? To put it in context to it, we paid $725,000 for a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house. It's one of the most expensive houses in the neighborhood, unfortunately, but you guys all know how the economy is. So it took me 17 years of moving away from Minnetonka till I could move back to Minnetonka. This is where I want to be, and it's where I want to have my home. But rezoning this from R1 to R4 is not keeping with what Minnetonka wants to have. The effect on wildlife, the coyotes, the deer, the turkeys, and everything else that resides in the park directly behind us, the 160-acre park, is going to be significantly affected. There's going to be a significant relocation of a lot of species in that area. The same concerns that have been expressed for the Plymouth Road development. That's a development that's changing 7 acres to approximately 12 houses. You're looking at changing 4 acres here to 40 houses. You're having a 10 times increase of the current residents in the area. You're looking at about a 3-time increase in the previous development that you looked at. And I think that you're going to see that the impact overall to the immediate neighborhood surrounding it on Tracy Lynn and Spring Lane is going to have at least a 2 to 3 time impact. You're going to see the primary entrance to Purgatory Park is directly south on Spring Lane, and then you have the bike path directly across the street by the institution, right by the library. And you're going to see 40 to realistically probably 60 to 80 additional residents that are going to be walking down the road. The road's already 19 feet. It's too narrow for a 2-lane road. And so we already have issues where we almost get in car accidents on a daily basis because of the amount of blind turns and the elevation changes on Spring Lane. So now you're going to additionally have marketed to elderly people, but we have no covenant, so we have no guarantee it's going to be elderly people 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So there's no guarantee to what it's going to be marketed to and how it's being sold. And we're going to have 60 to 80 reasonably people walking down the park to enjoy the amenities of why they're moving there in the park, and that's an additional foot traffic and concerns for, like Alan stated, you go there at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, you're going to see 300 kids walking to school. It's an extremely busy intersection. Usually most mornings I need to get out in Highway 7 to 494. I usually have to take a right and go down Excelsior Boulevard, oftentimes going to Glen Lake because it's too busy at the intersection to get through either 101 and Excelsior or to get through Highway 7 and Excelsior, or Highway 7 and 101. So I could keep going and going. I don't want to keep you guys here. I really appreciate the time and effort that you guys have put into being here and to listening to us and the professionalism that you've had. So I'm going to give some more time to everybody else, but I think there's just, read the documents that are before you and was outlined. I think it's like 12 or 13 specific bullets and issues that us as a neighborhood have identified that we have concerns about, and the signatures on there account for what the public really wants. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Good
Welcome.
evening here. I'll try to, Todd Tevote. I live at 5440 Tracy Lynn Terrace, right down the top dead center of the cul-de-sac of Tracy Lynn Terrace, coming into the neighborhood. I'm not going to reiterate everything that's been said before. A lot of good stuff out here. You've heard it, and I could definitely, grandstand on that a lot here. I feel pretty strongly about it. I just want to talk about the traffic a little bit in the traffic study. I realize the traffic out on 101 and Excelsior Boulevard, there's minimal impact on that traffic, and I get that. There's a ton of traffic there, very busy, probably not going to change that a whole lot. So it probably won't make it a whole lot worse, but it's definitely not going to make it any better. But the couple areas that I think the traffic are really a concern are, because of that bad intersection, a lot of traffic reroutes through our neighborhood. Comes off of 101 from the south through Mahoney, and it comes off Tracy Lynn into our neighborhood, and then if you try to come in off of Spring Lane there as well, and that traffic routes through that neighborhood quite a bit. Again, I live at top dead center of the cul-de-sac. Quite often when I'm sitting there having coffee at the kitchen counter, I can see cars come in off of 101, drive down, come into the cul-de-sac, look around, and drive back out. And these are people that are trying to skirt that traffic on County Road 3 and 101 over there. So also with the people in the new condos, that entrance onto Excelsior Boulevard there is terrible. It's terrible now. It's very small, windy, dark, too narrow already. It's got a lot of incline in there. And if you're trying to leave our neighborhood and go out onto Excelsior Boulevard, trying to get out to work in the morning or wherever you're going, trying to take a left at that point to get up to 101 is almost impossible. So you're almost forced to go east at that point and figure out where you're going to go and come back at it. So a lot of these people in this condo, what I can see happening, and I know what I would do if I would live there, instead of coming out and even going out to Excelsior Boulevard, I'd cut back into Tracy Lynn Terrace and come out there and either go out Tracy Lynn Terrace or Mahoney and get out on the 101. And that just further adds to the traffic into our neighborhood, which is a very quiet neighborhood. There's a lot of kids walking around in there, a lot of people walking dogs, going down to the park. Just with the amount of traffic on that intersection today, there's an increase of crazy traffic coming in our neighborhood. Most of these people are a little upset because of the backed up traffic, and they come through at some pretty good high speeds sometimes too. There's a lot of kids and a lot of dog walkers out in the neighborhood. So the impact again on that main intersection may not be that much, but it is definitely going to put a lot more impact into a residential neighborhood. And that's definitely a very strong concern of mine.
Great. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Emily Wendt, and my husband and I are the ones currently building the new home at 5328 Spring Lane. So we're very excited to be a part of this quiet residential neighborhood in the near future. We have 3 children that are currently in Minnetonka schools at MME or the high school, and they're also in a variety of activities up at the high school. And one of the main reasons we chose this lot was so that they would be able to walk to school and to the high school. So the traffic is obviously a huge concern for us as well, just as everyone else has talked about. We also have kind of a unique perspective because the owner of this proposed development also developed the lot we are currently building our home on. Based on the information that we've gathered, there is a track record of lots of changes to what he says he is going to do as things go on and on. So I have a letter here that is dated October 28th, 2019, that indicates that in March of 2017, the city had approved the original development of our lot subject to a variety of conditions, including stormwater management plan, a maintenance agreement, and a legal agreement along with financial securities. When we bought the lot in June of this year, we attempted to get a building permit, and we found out that none of those items had been completed.
Sorry, I'm just going to stop you for 1 second. Can you tie it back to this proposal? Sorry.
Yep,
I
nope,
just
it's
wanna make
coming
sure
right
we
now.
keep
Yep,
on
sorry.
track.
So basically our concern is that things are going to change and change and change with this proposal, just as it did with ours. And we had to take the financial burden of that stormwater management issue that before we could even start building our own home. So we are very concerned about him following a similar pattern with this development, which is why I tell that story. We really appreciate your willingness to listen to us. It's a late, long night, and just are really hoping that you uphold the decision to keep this R1.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other final comments in the audience? All right, doesn't look like it. Yona, hopefully you're still with us. Maybe you can bring the next person on the line. If you can give us your name and address for the record, if you can hear us. Yeah, if you can hear us, could you maybe turn off your TV in the background or computer?
My TV isn't on. This is Doug McPeak, 17609 Jennifer Lane. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, that's fine. I'm listening to this, and I was here for the 2015 proposal that he agreed to. We rerouted our street. We eliminated a cul-de-sac. We did all kinds of things to make this thing work. And now I'm hearing that the developer has decided not to do that development, but to do this new development. What, if you change this to R4, what makes him build that building? Nothing. He changed his mind on the first plan. Why would we think that he's going to build this building, this pretty building with the beautiful pink chips that we're all talking about, when he wouldn't build the first proposal? He didn't turn a spoonful of dirt to do that first proposal, and now, after giving the city council, giving their word to the people in our neighborhood, you're sitting here talking about how high the elevator should go in his building. This is amazing. What does our word mean? People bought houses. Everybody agreed to the plan, and he changed his mind, and now we're talking about putting in 40 condos with no guarantees of any kind about any part of it. I don't understand it. Can somebody answer me? If this is owned R4 and he decides to sell the land instead of building these buildings, what stops him?
Okay.
Can somebody answer that?
Yep, we'll answer it when all the public comments are done.
Okay. All right. Yes. No. We went through this. We did this 9 years ago. This was a done deal. People bought houses on the strength of our word. What? I don't understand. So, thank you for your time.
Great.
It's very late. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for your comments. Yona, do we have another caller on the line? Nope, just the one?
No, we do not have any others.
All right. Sounds like your microphone's the one that needs help, but city problem. All right, any other final comments? Otherwise, let me close the public comment first, and then I'll have you up, okay? Any other final comments? Nope, we will close. If you have something else to add, sure.
First, I just wanted to thank all the neighbors for coming out here tonight. I think, we're glad that these are such great neighbors and have such a great neighborhood. This is where we want to, have this development to add more great neighbors in this building. Just to quickly touch a couple points that were brought up about the schools. The 3 schools in the neighborhood was really why we were being so mindful about the product type that we were bringing into this neighborhood with a lesser intensity use. Also, I know as a new mom, and my colleague Nick has young children, we have, the kids' grandparents play a big role in, our little kids' lives. So I think this is a great area for, grandparents to be nearby in the, family-oriented neighborhood to help with drop-offs and pickups for school and daycare. Also, just a point to touch on what Commissioner Minion mentioned about the safety along the county road. Something we discussed is we could put, some landscape boulders or some landscape bollards with lights up along that area until the trees grow up and in, just for some more safety features, as well as obviously this development will have minimal lighting, but lighting nonetheless just for safety measures. And with the taking, I didn't mention this before, but the taking from the county road did happen during Lake West ownership. I just thought that would be an important thing to mention. And that this site is on actually not just a double frontage, but a triple frontage road. We actually have streets on all 4 corners of this parcel. And as far as the wildlife, in Purgatory, I can't imagine, the minimal change to this parcel is going to impact, the wildlife. In fact, that's what we're designing this around, is to preserve this green space. In fact, the 40 units of these condo flats preserves more green space than the single-family home plan. And the wildlife is a part of this. We're excited for these residents to take part in the bird watching. There's some really unique birds in this area, and the wildlife that's so unique to this area. So I think that's the main points I wanted to bring up. I thank you for letting me come back up and speak. And again, thank you so much for the neighbors for being out here. We hear you, and we took into your concerns and consideration in developing these plans.
Great, thank you. Staff, maybe you can help with answer the question. I'm going to try and maybe rephrase it about zoning. If it is rezoned, does it stay with the property, or does it stay with the owner of the property?
Yeah, Chair and Commission, the comprehensive plan and rezonings, once you've zoned, re-guided to those designations, change those, they stay with the property. So that's a little bit different than say, like a conditional use permit if you don't effectuate it. You don't start it, it goes away. Those actions actually stay with the land.
Okay. But in, just to humor the caller here, let's say this was approved and then the owner decided to sell, would a new owner need to come back to this body and go through this process again if they were to build something? Or is it essentially approved for the site and good to go?
Let's just say this project were approved with the 4 actions. The conditions that we place in the building permit or in the site and building plan are that the building permit has to be applied for and work has to start for it to be real. And if it doesn't, there's a sunset on that. So some of the approvals would stay, the rezoning, the comp plan guidance, but the other approvals to actually construct the project would have to be reapplied for.
Okay. So let's just say for argument's sake that someone were to sell it and want to build a 500 unit, I'm being facetious here, but something crazy like that, that would have to then come back through the process. And so there'd be other opportunities for public input and for approvals.
That is correct.
Is that correct? Okay, great, thanks. I just wanted to, I think, summarize kind of the sentiment that they were going for. All right, commissioners, we've asked lots of questions. If there's anything that must be answered, please ask it. Otherwise, let's give our thoughts. Who would like to go first? Let's raise Commissioner Waterman. Thanks for
Happy to go
going
first. Thanks, Chair. Thanks again to Lake West for your interest in Minnetonka and being here, keeping up with us tonight. And thanks again to the neighbors and everyone who shares your feedback again. Like Commissioner Minion said earlier, we read these packets and we really do value the feedback. I wasn't at the concept plan review, but I did study that and I looked intently at the minutes. And overall, I actually think this is an attractive development. I like the proposed architecture and design, owner occupied and the single level living. I do think it makes it desirable for our city. I do think some added density at this site might make sense, just given the intersection. It's a busy intersection. I don't really think that this would be a place right on the intersection where you'd necessarily find a great market for single family homes. I waver a little bit on rezoning the whole site. I could see it if there's not a ton of opposition and there's ample buffering. The other thing I'm trying to keep in mind, and I appreciate some of the other commissioners' questions, is like a lot of times when we talk about some multifamily living, maybe medium or high density, we think of these like large rectangular buildings, and I'm trying to remind myself that what's proposed is like these are not visually massive. It seems to me, in terms of these high density structures we've seen, for example, in Opus and elsewhere. I like the proposal to add more trees, and I think that there's a lot of green area here, which is, I think, a huge benefit. But I like to follow the comp plan, and I'm generally pretty reluctant to rezone, at least in this case, not without staff recommendation. We need the tree variance, setback variance I could waiver on. It's so far off from the concept review. Though I do take the point about maybe the single family homes would have removed some more trees and buffering. I'm not sure I'm sold on that. I'm concerned that as designed, this is underparked, and it would push parking, especially visitor parking, onto the streets. Just with this much density, it would just put more pressure on the neighborhood. Sounds like the stormwater standard might not be met, if I read that correctly. On traffic, I noted the minimal impact relayed in the traffic study, and actually for a lot of these meetings, I mean, the first thing that neighbors usually bring up is traffic, and then the traffic study doesn't necessarily prove that. I do think that turn from Spring Lane, when adding 40 units, might be pretty problematic and have an adverse impact on the neighborhood. And then really to my final point that I just think brings it all together, I think it's very relevant that really only 10 years ago, I mean, that's not a long time. There was a proposal and a plan, and that doesn't mean it's immutable. But I mean, that is, I think, what people bought into. I agree with that. That was, you saw the contours of the neighborhood, and it it wasn't a 30-year-old plan that, like, all right, maybe it needs to be revisited. So overall, to get to the point, I agree with the city that I think this plan needs to be rejected tonight. I think we could do something transformative with this property with a little bit of higher intensity usage in the northern part, but you'd need buy-in from the city, buy-in from the neighborhood. Maybe not unanimity, but just the opposition to this one is pretty fierce. And I just think that the concept plan was closer to the mark, in my opinion.
Great. Thank you for going first, Stu, by the way. Other comments from commissioners? Who's ready? Yeah, Commissioner Henry.
All good comments, Commissioner. Appreciate that. And again, appreciate people staying here late at night. Appreciate the developers. And I think this is a much more thoughtful proposal, a little bit more well thought out than the previous one we heard tonight. In terms of how the housing stock looks, I think it's very attractive. I like that. In one sense, I like the density because Kelsey brought up a good point about increasing energy efficiency. If you have all the homes together, I think there is a definite demand for housing stock of this nature in Minnetonka. So all those are good things. On the other side, I was on the comp plan committee back when we were designing it, and I also agree that it's important to honor what we did. There was a lot of thought that put into it. We spent years going into it, and like Commissioner Waterman says, that is not to be changed lightly. And we do have to measure it against certain criteria. And do I think that there's been criteria that has been met that's compelling enough to change the comp plan? And I think the answer is no in this case. Sometimes there's good reasons to do so, but here I look at it's just too dense, it's too massive, and it does not fit with the rest of the neighborhood. And the comp plan, when it was made, it bore that out. So I am in favor of honoring what the comp plan was intended to do, and I think we're going to go from there. But do I think there's room for managing something that's a little bit less dense, that's going to provide a public service? Absolutely. And I look forward to, again, a separate proposal, something else coming in that would be a little more reasonable, that has a smoother transition to the neighborhood. And again, if you keep on with the communication, I really appreciate what you were saying about that you hear the neighbors' concerns and you're taking action to address those things. So keep that up. And between the two of you, and when the city intervenes and then it comes to us again, we're going to have a better proposal. And I think I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Great. Thank you. Other commissioners' thoughts? Who'd like to go next? Who will go next? Let me ask that question. Yes, Commissioner Maxwell, thanks for going.
I mostly agree with you, Commissioner Waterman, that I think it's appropriate to have some medium density on the northern portion of this site. That one of the things that the developer mentioned that sort of struck my mind was that it makes sense to have an intuitive transition happening at a road. I think you could argue here that the road is on the northern side of this property, not on the southern side of this property, and that's where that transition, currently that's where that transition is happening, and doesn't make sense to make that transition further south. So, but I could be convinced that the higher northern portion could be higher density, like we saw in the concept plan, with lower density on the southern side. So that's a no for the comp plan amendment as is in this proposal. But I think rezoning also on that northern side makes sense. As far as the site plan and variances, I think a setback variance in this case makes a bit of sense. The staff mentioned that if you move the parking lot to the exterior side, you may be able to meet that ordinance, but I'd rather have a less setback on the road side, where it's going to have less of an impact to those neighbors, and keep the distance, the buffering of that parking lot to the R1 neighbors. And there is some precedent for other, well, I wouldn't say precedent, but some other areas in the city where there are lower setbacks, and the Ridgedale area is one of those along Plymouth Road, sort of in the neighborhood we just talked about. I also think the access variance is reasonable based on the county's feedback that there's going to have to be an ordinance for that. And I think that's reasonable. And then the difficult one in my mind is the tree ordinance, where we sort of have incomplete data, but 64% of the tree removal versus 35% is very high. And I don't see that there are practical difficulties to meeting that one. It's just a desire to cram more units into the lot. So if this were, say, just the northern lot, or the northern building and not the southern building, that's something that I would consider, or having, again, the single family on the southern side of that. But I will not be supporting it as it is presented here tonight.
Great, thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah,
There you go.
I'll echo and be brief. I agree. I think there's, as cities grow and evolve, there's just going to be a natural transition here. It's a little more dense. There is a Fortune 100 company sitting probably 3/4 of a mile to the north of this site in Target. So there is going to be some density that should happen here eventually. So I could echo, probably get more comfortable with the concept plan, I guess, in my mind. Like, kind of found that to be an attractive transition from north to south. I was surprised to see the unit size double, and I struggled with kind of trading off, like, hey, here's 40 home units, but what's the trade-off there? I think I agree with Commissioner Henry. I think there's probably more here than the prior presentation worth considering, but tonight I'm going to be a no. So.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Commissioner Minion, what do you think?
So many great comments. I'm going to be fast because you guys have covered so many things.
The problem with going last, you gotta go first.
It just, we're kind of thinking and hearing the same thing, as I think is a quick answer. I would like to congratulate the developer on a lot of great ideas. It's a beautiful property. It has a lot to offer. But I think we need to follow the plans, the city's plans, but we need to stay within those rules. The trees are kind of an issue for me. I think we need to make sure we kind of keep an eye on that. But for me, it's a no.
Great.
Thanks for the great feedback from the city residents. I was impressed to see some of the documents going back to 2014. It's well done.
Thanks. Commissioner Banks?
Yeah, I think all the points have been made. I think I'll just add briefly that it's a little disappointing that the concept plan, where it was the 20-unit building and the 3 or 4 homes, and the discussion with that was about density in that corner and beautiful product. How do you make it fit? How do we get neighbors buy-in? And I would have expected that coming back in here, we would have seen some of the comments from that concept plan implemented, with the most important one being about the density. But we come in tonight and we double the concept plan. And again, great product, great building, beautiful. I just think it's the wrong location for the amount of units that you're trying to put in that corner. So with that, I would be not in agreement with making the changes to the comprehensive plan, as well as all of the other items that would follow that. I would really like to see you come back with this same plan. It's a beautiful building, beautiful area you have here, but to do something right here is to just get the right number of units. And hopefully next time we see you, it won't be 80 units. We're trying to put it there. But if we can get the right number of units, I think we can get a lot of buy-in and try to make this a beautiful project. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other final comments from commissioners? All right, doesn't look like it. Thank you to all the residents who came out and respectfully spoke your opinion. So thank you for sharing, and for Lake West for sticking with us, and Mr. Fretham personally for having thick skin. Boy, being a developer is not for the faint of heart, is it? But you knew that by now. So either way, I just want to say thank you for all the time you all have put in. I actually, I think with most of the commission, I support more density on that northerly part. That's why I actually liked the concept review. And usually it's kind of backwards. Usually concept reviews start big, massive, and we have to whittle it down. This way we kind of flipped it and went the opposite direction. And I think we could have found a way to make that work, to be honest with you. I think we would be looking at a very different vote if that's what we actually saw. So I'm actually in favor of the kind of northerly rezoning as a transition, and I agree with Commissioner Maxwell, as I usually do. She has good points, but about the road kind of being that transition point. So again, while it's medium, it's not the intensity that we see. We're not going from R1 to 250 units, which we see more often than not. So I do support that, but I just think the other variances we have to find a way to get within, and I think kind of going back to that concept plan is the better way to go. So any other final comments, commissioners? Otherwise, I think we're probably ready for a motion. Would someone like to make a motion? Right now, what's on the table is a motion to recommend the City Council adopt the resolution denying the proposal for items concerning Minnetonka Flats at 5290 and 5300 Spring Lane, 5295 and 5325 County Road 101, and 5301 Tracy Lynn Terrace. Boy, that's a lot of addresses. Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion, Chair.
Motion Maxwell.
And I'll second the motion.
Second Henry. Staff, please poll the commission.
Hanson?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Maxwell?
Yes.
Minion?
Yes.
Waterman?
Yes.
Banks?
Yes.
Chair Sewell?
Yes, motion carries. And this is to be heard by the City Council on February 12th. Good luck with your project. All right, next is moving on to item number 9, adjournment. Commissioner Minion, would you like to make the motion to adjourn?
Yes, I would like to make a motion
Take
to
it for
adjourn,
a test
sir.
drive. All right, motion Minion.
I will second.
Second Hanson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Good night.